Hi everyone, welcome to another Paranormal M video. Before we begin, please subscribe if you haven't already. I've also had a few people tell me that these stories help them fall asleep, so feel free to share the video with anyone who has trouble sleeping. Tonight's first story follows a woman who experienced strange activity over many years. No matter where she lived, things seemed to move, doors opened by themselves, and objects were sometimes thrown across the room. She also had a frightening encounter with a dark figure in her bedroom. Get comfortable, and I hope you sleep well tonight. For as long as I can remember, strange things have happened around me. I'm talking about the kind of activity people usually associate with a poltergeist. Thoughts moving by themselves, things being thrown across rooms, and the unsettling feeling that something has attached itself to you. Sometimes I wonder whether that attachment made me stand out somehow, almost like a porch light in the dark, drawing other things toward me. One of the most frightening experiences happened when I was about 22. I was living with my boyfriend, who later became my husband. Every time I walked toward our bedroom, even just to use the bathroom, I felt this sudden wave of fear. It wasn't ordinary nervousness. It felt instinctive, as though my body knew something was waiting in there before my mind could understand it. One night, I was tired and wanted to go to bed. I asked my boyfriend to come with me, but he was halfway through a movie and wanted to finish watching it. So I went into the bedroom alone and lay down. Almost immediately, something pressed itself on top of me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I tried to call out, but nothing came. All I could do was struggle against this crushing weight until, somehow, I finally broke free and screamed. My boyfriend came running into the room. As he reached the doorway, he saw a large, dark mass lift away from my body and disappear through the ceiling. He sat beside me for several minutes, trying to calm me down. Eventually, we convinced ourselves that whatever it was had gone. He returned to the living room to finish his movie, and I tried to lie down again. The moment I settled back onto the bed, it came down on me a second time. Once again, I was completely trapped beneath it, unable to move or draw a breath. I fought until I managed to scream, and my boyfriend rushed back in. He saw the same black shape rising from me, this time vanishing through the upper corner of the room. That was enough for both of us. He grabbed our blankets and pillows, and we slept on the floor in front of the television. Whatever had been in that bedroom didn't bother us again that night. Nearly a decade later, I was staying with my parents while helping care for my grandmother. She was undergoing chemotherapy for advanced breast cancer, and the entire household was exhausted and emotionally drained. One evening, an old friend was visiting me. We were sitting in my childhood bedroom while I copied some music onto CDs for them. Suddenly, I heard the doorknob turning. I watched it move and assumed my grandmother was trying to come inside, so I called out, "Come in." The door slowly opened. There was nobody standing on the other side. I immediately got up and checked on my grandmother. She was sound asleep in bed. My mother was asleep in her room, and my father was working an overnight shift. My friend and I were the only people awake in the house. A few years after that, my husband and I moved to another state, but the activities seemed to come with us. One evening, while my husband was taking a shower, something picked up my hairbrush and threw it at him. I was nowhere near the bathroom. I was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Another incident happened when we had a guest over. I'll be honest, this was someone I found extremely difficult to be around, and apparently, whatever shared our home could sense the tension. There were 2 bottles sitting on top of the refrigerator. A large bottle of vodka stood in front, with a heavy glass bottle of rum positioned behind it. Without anyone touching them, the rum bottle somehow moved around the vodka, launched off the refrigerator, and flew directly toward our guest. They didn't stay long after that. About 6 months later, my husband and I went to a newly opened bar for Valentine's Day. A friend of ours was hosting karaoke, and we spent part of the evening playing pool with another couple. When we paused to sit and talk, our pool cues suddenly began falling and sliding from the far end of the table. Then a piece of chalk shot across the room and struck the wall. The other woman looked terrified. My husband gave a nervous laugh and said, "Don't worry, the ghosts are probably following her again." Her entire expression changed. She looked directly at me, suddenly angry, and said, "You need to leave. Now." At the time, I thought she was blaming me for something I couldn't control. I told her that she was free to leave if she felt uncomfortable. Looking back, I wish I had listened. Later that night, I became seriously ill and disoriented. I eventually learned that a man I had been playing pool with had slipped something into my drink. For years, I thought the disturbances around me were only meant to frighten me. Now I sometimes wonder whether the flying cues and the chalk striking the wall were trying to do something else. Maybe they weren't causing trouble that night. Maybe they were trying to warn me. I want to tell you a story my grandmother shared with me many years ago. She carried it with her for the rest of her life, and whenever she spoke about it, her voice never wavered. She swore that every detail happened exactly as she remembered it. My grandmother grew up in a small farming village near Sparta in southern Greece. Her family kept goats, grew olives, and worked long days in fields scattered across the hills. One late summer afternoon, when she was about 19, she was returning from a distant field with a small group of villagers. The journey home took them across a narrow mountain trail that wound through a thick forest. People rarely used that path alone. There were stories about travelers who had entered the forest and never returned. No one knew whether those disappearances involved accidents, wild animals, or something else entirely. Still, the villagers took the warnings seriously and always traveled together. As the group neared the village, my grandmother realized she had left behind a cloth bundle containing her shawl and a few tools. Since she was the youngest and still had plenty of energy, she told the others she would quickly run back and collect it. At first, the forest felt completely ordinary. She heard birds calling between the trees, cicadas buzzing in the heat, and dry leaves shifting beneath her shoes. Then, without warning, everything went silent. Not gradually, all at once. The birds stopped. The insects stopped. Even the wind seemed to disappear. My grandmother stood still and listened. There was nothing. She felt uneasy, but she saw no sign of danger, so she continued along the trail. A few minutes later, something moved inside the bushes beside her. The branches shook violently, and she heard a heavy dragging sound across the ground. Her first thought was that it might be a wolf or perhaps a wild boar. But what came out of the bushes was neither of those things. It was an enormous snake. She said its body was wider than her waist, and it was so long that part of it remained hidden among the trees. She never saw where its tail ended, but strangely, its size was not what stayed with her most. It was the creature's beauty. Its scales were covered in brilliant colors: turquoise, deep orange, rose pink, violet, and flashes of silver that seemed to change whenever it moved. The patterns were so detailed that she said they looked hand-painted, almost like the decorations inside an old church. My grandmother knew snakes well. She had grown up seeing them in fields, beneath stones, and near the animal pens. She was cautious around them, but she was not someone who panicked at the sight of one. This creature, she insisted, was unlike any snake she had ever known. It slowly moved farther onto the trail, blocking her path. Then it lifted its head until its eyes were level with hers. And this is the part of the story I have always found most unsettling. She said she was not afraid. Instead, a deep feeling of calm came over her. She felt warm, peaceful, and strangely safe. She could not bring herself to step backward or look away. It was not fear holding her still. She felt as though the snake's presence had drawn her into a dream. For several moments, they simply stared at one another. Then she heard a voice calling from farther down the mountain. One of the young women from the group had become worried and decided to follow her. The moment the snake heard the woman's voice, it lowered its head and slipped back into the bushes. My grandmother watched its patterned body disappear between the trees, but even then, she never saw its full length. By the time the other woman reached her, the forest sounds had returned. The insects were buzzing again. Birds were moving through the branches. Everything appeared normal. My grandmother told the woman what she had seen, but when they searched the edge of the trail, they found nothing. No shed skin, no tracks, not even a broken branch. For years, I tried to find a sensible explanation. I searched through photographs of snakes from Greece and other parts of the world. I showed her boas, pythons, vipers, and rare species with unusually bright colors. She rejected every one of them. She said the creature's colors were more vivid, its patterns were completely different, and there was something about the way it looked at her that no photograph could capture. I also tried to learn more about the old disappearances connected to that mountain path. I never found any official records, but rural villages did not always document such events carefully in those days. It is possible the stories were exaggerated over time. It is also possible they began for a reason. My grandmother never claimed to know what the creature was. She only knew what she had seen, and until the end of her life, she never changed a single part of her account. Maybe it was an unusually large animal seen in a moment of exhaustion. Maybe the afternoon light transformed its colors. Or perhaps there are things hidden in old forests that do not fit neatly into the names we have given the world. I still do not know. But whenever I imagine that silent mountain path, I picture my grandmother standing alone beneath the trees, face to face with a beautiful creature that seemed to belong somewhere between nature, legend, and a dream. Hey there. I want to share some stories that have been etched deep into my memory. Moments where the ordinary world brushed against something, well, something quite different. Let's start with a story from a few years back, about my first job as a security officer at a resort with an indoor water park. I worked the overnight shift, and during my training, the night manager, let's call him Jack, shared a chilling piece of history about the place. He said it was one of the last places a child was seen alive before mysteriously vanishing. I was skeptical back then, brushing it off as just a story to add some spice to the job. But that night, as I roamed the silent halls, I began to hear a loud tapping noise echoing through a section of the resort. It sounded like someone was tapping on the air ducts in the hallway. I showed one of the hotel engineers, but even they couldn't pinpoint the source of the tapping. Then, while checking fire extinguishers during one of my shifts, I was near an emergency exit inside the lower restaurant. That door only had a handle on the inside and couldn't be opened from outside. Suddenly, a loud slam echoed against the door in the dark restaurant. My heart jumped. Thinking it was a prank, I opened the door, expecting to see someone or some footprints in the freshly fallen snow outside. But there was nothing. No footprints, no one around. Another time, in the lower restaurant's kitchen, I saw something that staff had talked about for years. A tall shadow figure gliding along the wall through the swinging door. I froze, then turned around and hurried back to the office. I left the job for a while, but eventually returned. My old shift partner and I started to test this presence, or maybe multiple entities. It was a bad idea, but curiosity got the better of us. We'd sit in the hotel spa, waiting for something to happen. I felt a cold touch on my elbow in one of the rooms, and witnessed a shadowy figure peek around a door frame before vanishing. A few days later, we heard two voices, a female or childlike voice, and another deeper, almost demonic voice, followed by heavy footsteps climbing the stairs. We checked the entire spa but found no one. Challenging whatever haunted the hotel was thrilling, but came with consequences. A month or two later, the hotel closed after being bought out by a competitor. As security staff, we had 60 extra days of employment, which meant working alone at night in an empty building haunted by what felt like multiple spirits. The random banging sounds echoed through the halls. One night, my old shift partner and I heard what sounded like a bowling ball rolling down the stairs. Two police officers even saw an old food warmer violently shaking in the lower restaurant. One officer refused to check on me afterward. It was the same place where I later saw a floating gray mass. Twice, I heard a loud, childlike scream from the restaurant, but I never investigated, alone and unarmed, with no easy way to call for help. Then, shadows appeared inside the water park, especially around the child's splash tower. One night, after a loud bang, I looked up to see a solid black mass, like a head and shoulders, staring down at me. I haven't gone back to that hotel since, neither as an employee nor a guest. Now, shifting gears to a summer hiking trip along a riverbed when the water was low. I was focused on photographing a rock formation when I heard a man yelling my name from across the river. I looked around but saw no one. Then, out of nowhere, a loud, guttural male voice screamed, "Help me!" followed by the sound of breaking branches. My instincts screamed at me to run in the opposite direction, even though I usually run toward danger when help is needed. I ran until I was lost, even hopping a stranger's backyard fence, only to find bones scattered all over. It took me an hour of frantic wandering to find my way out. I've searched for news reports about assaults in the area, but found nothing to explain that terrifying moment. Another night, I was sleeping over at a friend's house after some video games. Around 3 a.m., I woke to what sounded like his mom arguing with someone. I heard a woman scream and cry, "$7! You did it for $7!" repeated several times, each time louder and more intense. My friend was asleep beside me, unresponsive despite my shaking and attempts to wake him. Feeling awkward, I stayed in the room, not wanting to intrude on family matters. But when the screaming escalated, I knew I had to intervene, otherwise someone might get hurt. I got up and opened the door mid-scream, and suddenly, everything stopped. The house was silent and pitch black. I flicked on the light. No one was there. I called out, but only silence answered. I closed the door, woke my friend, and we stayed up the rest of the night. The next morning, he asked his parents if anything had happened, but they said they slept through the night. That experience remains one of the eeriest I've had. Back in boarding school, nestled in the jungle of Southeast Asia, our small chalets housed 2 people each. At around 1 or 2 a.m., after finishing my revision, I heard the front door open and slam shut. I called my roommate, but got no response. Then, his bedroom door slammed too. About 30 minutes later, loud banging erupted from his room, like cupboards and shelves being violently slammed open and shut. Concerned, I checked for an intruder, maybe a monkey, as they often snuck in looking for food. But the room was empty and calm. When I called him, he said he was staying over at a friend's place. The noises started again, so I locked my door and stayed put. Peering out the window, I saw a security guard passing by. After a chat, he told me he'd been called for a noise complaint and heard the same sounds. He advised me to stay in my room and not to engage with whatever was causing the disturbance. Apparently, such things happened often in the jungle. Now here's one that shook me deeply. A night alone at home when terror gripped me for hours. I was exhausted, but couldn't sleep, heart racing, sweating, shaking. I thought it was a panic attack, took my meds, and tried to calm down. Around 1 a.m., noises started, footsteps and knocks, but I was so tired I drifted back to sleep. Then, suddenly, a strange dream engulfed me. My room was the same, but outside, the sky was a deep, eerie red at sunset. I got up to get water but found my door locked. Odd, since it had no lock. Panic surged. I sat back down, searching for my phone to call someone. Then, a door creaked open, and I froze. A strange, bald man in black stood silently in the doorway, faceless. He said, "You may come in, Grandma." An old lady I'd never seen before entered, sat beside me on the bed, and the man vanished as the door slammed shut. She was tearful and sad, talking about loneliness and needing my help, apologizing for what she was about to do. Suddenly, a flash of realization hit me. She lay in the same position I had fallen asleep in. I choked on fear and woke with a start, heart pounding. I couldn't sleep that night and spent hours watching YouTube until dawn. Later, I learned our elderly neighbor had passed out that night. That haunting memory will never fade. Then there's the tale of the White House, a big, split-level house with a porch that my family lived in when I was a teenager. It was set back on a large yard and had a long driveway leading to an old carriage barn. No one lived there before us, but I always felt uneasy passing it. When we moved in, I immediately told my mom, "I don't like this house." She just said, "Too bad." Inside, it was surprisingly nice. 3 bedrooms, each with its own full bath, and a wood-burning fireplace I loved. But then, strange things started. Footsteps upstairs, sounds of something dragging across the floor, doors opening and slamming. My mom checked, and the stair door was locked. No one was supposed to be up there. Our landlord said no one had been up there since we moved in. We explored the carriage barn, which had a little windowed room with shelves, a table, and an old piano. We pretended to be ghost hunters, asking questions and leaving notes, but nothing happened. One autumn, my best friend and I saw a man in a yellow coat standing by the stove, but he vanished before we could see him clearly. Other times, the TV would turn itself on and off, channels changing, CDs skipping, volume fluctuating. It never felt hostile, just a presence wanting us to know it was there. My little sister, only 2 at the time, once pointed at my mom's closet and said, "A guy go in there." The most unsettling experience came when I was 14. Around midnight, just as I was falling asleep, I felt static coursing through my body and sensed someone sitting on my bed's edge. I heard whispers, static, and a car engine starting, sounds coming from the direction of the carriage barn. A deep sadness overwhelmed me. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped. Movement was slow, like stop motion. I managed to crawl to my bedroom door's threshold as the sun rose, and the feeling lifted. My mom noticed I looked unwell and let me stay home from school. Later, we learned the house once belonged to Kenny Whitney, a piano teacher who tragically took his own life in the carriage barn after being disowned for being gay. I think Kenny was trying to tell me his story. Even now, I'm drawn to that house, often dreaming of it and wishing I could live there again. Finally, a story from a family trip right after Christmas 2018. We went to a spa hotel known for being haunted, offering ghost tours and packages. I thought it was just a marketing gimmick. The hotel was in a small town famous for hot springs. The town felt worn down, and the hotel's history was tied to healing waters. One day, returning from lunch, we heard a radio blasting down the hall, scanning through stations, loud and distorted. It was coming from our room, even though the maid had cleaned it earlier. My husband works in hotels, so we always turn off alarms upon arrival to avoid surprises. That night, Our daughter slept well, but the next night, she screamed uncontrollably, pulling herself up in her pack and play, desperate to escape. I held her all night as she clung to me. Later, I had a massage in the spa's grotto, where silence was strictly enforced. Just as I got comfortable, the relaxing music abruptly switched to loud FM radio, scanning channels. The therapist came in, calmly saying, "The ghosts have been messing with this all day," then carried on as if nothing unusual had happened. I never took the ghost tour, but now wish I had. That hotel was definitely haunted. Part of me wants to go back to see if it was a one-time thing, but another part is genuinely scared to return. Thanks for listening to these stories. Some scary, some strange, all unforgettable. I hope they give you a glimpse into the unseen echoes that ripple through places and moments, reminding us that sometimes the past isn't really gone, just waiting to be heard. Hey, I want to share this really strange experience that happened to me not too long ago, when I was about 18. So, it was the summer right after we graduated high school, and one of my closest friends, let's call him Mick, lived a couple towns over. We used to hang out all the time back then. For a good month or two, I'd head over to his neighborhood, and we'd spend hours in my car, just smoking and talking. His neighborhood was this quaint little suburb, mostly older folks living there, quiet and peaceful, with these really charming streets lined with big trees. We had a few favorite spots to park and chill during our sessions. Sometimes, we'd even wander to this popular forest trail right at the edge of his neighborhood. It was a pretty well-used trail. Runners, walkers, bikers throughout the day. Nothing sketchy at all. One evening, Mick and I decided to smoke on that trail. Honestly, that was pretty normal for us by then. We walked maybe a mile and a half into the trail, just joking around, chatting about whatever came to mind. Eventually, we found a bench and sat down to light up and talk about our day, interests, future plans, typical stuff. We saw one other person the whole time, a middle-aged man jogging past us briefly. That was it. By the time we finished, the sun had set and it was getting pretty dark. So we figured we'd head back to the car to keep rolling. As we started walking back, Mick and I were talking casually, but the darkness around us was thickening fast. At first, I could barely see a thing, and I was trying to let my eyes adjust. After a few moments, my vision cleared just enough to see the trail with this eerie bluish tint, kind of like in those old horror movies where the night has this unnatural glow. The forest on either side was pitch black, like an endless wall of shadows. We kept walking shoulder to shoulder, and soon the trail stretched straight ahead, ending in a bend that disappeared from our view, maybe 150, 200 feet away. Mick was on my right, and we were chatting quietly, nothing serious. Then, out of nowhere, this narrow beam of white light appeared, cutting through the darkness just off the trail ahead, a little to the left. At first, I thought it was just moonlight reflecting off the riverbank nearby. But then I noticed the light was moving. And it wasn't just flickering or wavering. It was moving smoothly, deliberately, coming closer. I was mid-sentence when my words just trailed off. Mick was staring at it too, frozen. Our pace slowed without us even realizing it, and we watched this figure emerging from the forest. It was this whitish-gray shape, almost glowing, moving toward us but not seeming to touch the ground. No sound, no footsteps. Mick finally broke the silence, whispering, "Do you see that?" I nodded, though I was trying hard to convince myself it was something normal. I said, "It's probably just moonlight," but Mick wasn't buying it. "No, man, I don't think so." The figure was now maybe 60 feet away. We could tell it was human-shaped, legs, shoulders moving with the stride, but something was off. It looked like a woman in a white dress, her entire form glowing white from head to toe. Her legs, arms, even her head were pale white, but I couldn't see any hair or details. It was like she was made of light. My heart started pounding. I tried to reason it out. Maybe a man in a white coat? But it didn't make sense to be out here so late. Plus, this figure wasn't stepping on the ground like a normal person. I was terrified but strangely calm, like there was no danger despite how unreal it all felt. She kept coming closer, closer, maybe 20 or 30 feet now. I could almost make out her height, tall, almost eye level with me. But no eyes, no face, just a gentle glow in the shape of a nose. Mick and I stopped dead in our tracks, frozen, our eyes locked on her as she approached directly between us. Without thinking, Mick and I exchanged a look, pure horror and disbelief. He blurted, "Dude, what is that?" We both stared back at her, and then, just like that, she was gone. Vanished into thin air, as if she'd never been there at all. We didn't say a word for a moment, just stunned. Then I said, "Let's go." We started speed walking, then broke into a run, trying not to leave each other behind. I have no idea how far we'd gotten, but it felt like we were suddenly at the trail's end. The whole thing probably lasted less than a minute, but it felt like time froze. We jumped into my car and I floored it back to Mick's place. He was shaking, asking over and over, "Bro, did you see that? We both saw it, right?" We kept confirming every detail, trying to make sense of it. What was it? Why did it show itself? What did it mean? It completely shattered my sense of reality. The area felt so unnatural after that, like we'd stepped into some kind of limbo. What really chills me out, but also keeps me grounded, is that Mick saw it too. We both saw this glowing woman walking toward us, gliding over the ground without a sound. Later, I thought maybe it was the spirit of someone who used to live in the neighborhood, maybe an old woman who loved that trail in her youth. I'd also heard the area was a Civil War site, so who knows? Mick and I sometimes talk about that night. We even tried going back once, hoping to see her again. But as soon as we got near the trail, this gut feeling told me to turn around. Neither of us wanted to face whatever it was again. Since then, I've become more open to the idea of spirits and things beyond our understanding. When we tell this story, people usually laugh it off, thinking it's just some wild tale. But for us, it was real. A truly strange, reality-bending experience. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear if anyone else has had something similar happen. Hey, I want to share something really strange that happened to me and my cousin a few years back. I'm 31 now, but this took place when I was about 27 or 28. We were living together in a small apartment complex in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, right in the middle of a thick forested area. There was this freeway running right through the complex that connected to a highway, and we actually used to walk along this freeway every night to get to and from work. Yeah, walking on a highway, that alone was nerve-wracking, but that's where our story begins. So, we both worked at a Wendy's on Manheim Pike, and we always requested the same shifts because we liked working together. It was fun and made the long nights bearable. One night, around 3:30 in the morning, after closing the store at 1 a.m., we had finished all our closing duties. It usually took us at least an hour and a half to 2 hours to get everything sorted, and we started our walk home. My place was just about 50 to 70 feet from the freeway, and my cousin's apartment was just a short walk off the freeway too, so it was a pretty familiar route for us. We were walking down that dark freeway, chatting like we always did to pass the time. It was pitch black outside. When I say dark, I mean there wasn't a single streetlight for miles. Just trees, thick and dense, lining both sides of the road. At that hour, you literally couldn't see anything beyond the first row of trees. Even our phone flashlights only lit up about 5 feet ahead, but by then, we barely needed them because we knew the path so well. Out of nowhere, we noticed this bright light coming down the freeway. It looked like a headlight, but it was blindingly bright. Way too bright for any car or motorcycle I'd ever seen. At first, I thought it must be some new kind of fancy light, but then I realized there was only one light, so I assumed it was a motorcycle. What struck me as odd though, and it hit me only in hindsight, is that there was no sound. No engine noise, no hum, nothing. Just this eerie, blinding light. We moved to the other side of the road to stay safe, just in case. The light was still coming toward us, but then, when it reached the small bridge where a creek ran beneath it, the border between the apartment complex and the forest, the light just vanished, completely disappeared. I turned to my cousin and asked if he saw it too. He nodded, eyes wide, and said, "Yeah, that was nuts." We both laughed nervously and shrugged it off, thinking maybe it was some trick of the eyes. The very next day, same time, same walk home. Again, there it was, this bright light speeding down the freeway, but faster this time. We stopped dead in our tracks, just staring at it. The light raced past the bridge, but something impossible happened next. It made this incredibly sharp left turn, one that no vehicle could physically make at that speed. And then, it shot straight into the trees. We watched, frozen, as the light zipped about 200 feet deep into the forest, weaving between the trees like it was dodging them. And then, just like before, it disappeared. No crash, no noise, nothing. We looked at each other, utterly baffled. Nothing that exists could do that. We kept walking, but now the air felt heavy, strange. We were on edge, glancing around nervously, but the forest was silent, the darkness impenetrable. Then came the third night. We were talking about the weird experiences from the past 2 nights, walking close together, me just a step behind my cousin, both of us looking over each other's shoulders as we talked. I pulled out my phone to check the time. We'd left the store at 2:58 a.m., and it was now 3:37. Suddenly, mid-conversation, everything changed. I stopped dead in my tracks, mid-step, my foot hanging in the air. The world around me vanished. There was no warning, no distortion, no flicker, just gone. 1 second, we were on that dark road with trees crowding both sides. The next, nothing. No road beneath my feet, no trees, no darkness, no sky, just endless, blinding white. Imagine standing on a blank sheet of paper, but all around you, infinitely, no edges, no shadows, no depth. It was like the first time Goku entered the hyperbolic time chamber, just pure white, empty space. My cousin, who had been just a foot and a half ahead, was nowhere to be seen. I was completely alone in this impossible void. Fear gripped me. I didn't know what to do or how to react. I just stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of what was happening. After what felt like 3 seconds, though time seemed meaningless, it all snapped back. The road returned beneath my feet, the trees reappeared, and my cousin was about 5 feet ahead of me instead of just a step away. I realized I hadn't moved during that moment of nothingness, but clearly he had, which explained the distance. I'd read a little about these things, wormholes, glitches in reality, and how some people have said even a tiny movement inside them can land you miles away. I told him what I thought, but he was just as shaken. I asked him, "Did you see something?" He nodded, wide-eyed, and described it as the brightest lightning bolt he could imagine, like a lightning flash that was so intense it turned everything white, but 100 times worse. I told him I didn't see any lightning, just pure white nothingness. He agreed, saying that was the closest way he could explain it. Then I checked my phone again. It read 4:20 a.m. I was stunned. Just seconds before, it had said 3:37. That's nearly a 45-minute jump that we lost somewhere in that blank space. I showed my cousin and he joked that I was messing with him, but we both knew what we'd experienced was real. Looking around, we realized we were no longer near the start of that road where the dimension shift happened. We were actually about 200 feet past my house, a couple minutes walk back from where we'd been. It was unsettling to say the least. Since then, my cousin and I don't talk as much, but whenever we do, that night always comes up. We both still think about it, wonder what it was, and hope we never experience anything like it again. Has anyone else ever had something like this happen? Because as far as I know, it's just been us two. And honestly, it's the most bizarre, terrifying thing I've ever lived through. Hey, I want to share this really strange experience that happened a few years ago, back when I was living with my girlfriend. Well, my ex now, but she was my girlfriend for 8 years, at this tiny apartment in Manhattan. It was a rough time for us. We were having some serious relationship issues, and eventually, we separated a few months after what I'm about to tell you. But having been with me for so long, she had kind of gotten used to the fact that weird stuff tends to happen around me. For about 4 or 5 months, the paranormal activity in that apartment went completely off the rails. It got so bad that I actually started documenting everything. I really wish I still had the evidence to share with you now. It was almost daily occurrences. Things falling over when nobody was near them, doors opening by themselves, hearing someone calling your name when you were completely alone. And then there were these orbs, sometimes white, sometimes black, that would zip through the room. What was really eerie about these orbs was how fast they moved. It was almost impossible to follow them with your eyes, but if you managed, you'd see them fly right into a wall and then vanish, as if they were passing through it. I remember the silence that would follow, like the whole room was holding its breath. But the thing that really pushed me to start recording this stuff was something that happened with our gaming setup. We had all our consoles hooked up to one TV. By that time, I had run out of new games for my PS3 and Wii, so we mostly used the Xbox 360. But here's the catch. Our Xbox wasn't really for gaming. It was mostly connected to our phones via USB to play music and watch downloaded shows through the media center. We had a Kinect connected, and it was always on. One day, we were just chilling, listening to music through the Xbox Media Center, when I noticed something strange on the Kinect screen. It was showing 3 people registered in the room. But here's the weird part. There was only me and my girlfriend, and we were alone in the entire apartment. No one else was anywhere near us. What made it even more unsettling was where the Kinect said one of those people was standing, right above us on the top bunk bed. Now, we had bunk beds, and the top bunk was piled high with clean clothes we hadn't folded yet. According to the Xbox, this invisible person was standing there, sifting through the clothes and the bed itself. At first, we thought the Xbox was glitching, so I reset it. But nope, the 3 people were still there. We didn't know what to make of it, but we decided to keep the Xbox on every day for the same reason. Sometimes the 3 figures showed up, sometimes they didn't. When they did, we'd check in on them. Sometimes one of the figures just stood there. Other times it would wave, and once or twice, it even looked like it was dancing. I knew no one would believe me if I told this story, so I started recording short clips whenever it happened. I think I managed to get 3 or 4 videos. It was bizarre and a little creepy, but also fascinating. Then, one day, we were sitting on the bed, playing cards quietly while listening to music. Suddenly, the music stopped without any warning. Puzzled, we looked up and saw that the voice command on the Xbox had activated all by itself. Neither of us had said a word, I grabbed my phone and started recording the TV, explaining what was going on. On the screen, the little microphone icon was lit up with sound waves, showing that someone, or something, was speaking, even though the room was completely silent. That moment was one of the creepiest for me. With all this weird stuff happening, I decided to keep a detailed log on my phone of every incident I could remember. The time it happened, what happened, everything. I filled about 2 months' worth of notes. Then, for 2 days, nothing happened. On the third day, as I was heading to the bathroom, I heard footsteps inside. I stopped and jotted it down before going in, noting that no one was actually in there. Just as I hit save, I felt my phone get pulled right out of my hand. My heart jumped. I picked it back up and logged that strange event. After that, I went back to the bedroom where my girlfriend was waiting, and we started playing Assassin's Creed. I was bored, so I decided to replay some parts. I sat down on the bed, holding the PS3 controller in my right hand, and placed my old HTC phone on the bed next to me, between me and the TV. While playing, I got a text from a friend. Without pausing the game, I picked up the phone, read and replied to the message, then set it right back down in the same spot. 3 minutes later, feeling restless, I asked my girlfriend if she wanted to go out for dinner. She agreed, and we started getting ready. As I was changing my pants, I reached to grab my phone to put it in my pocket, only to find it was gone. I asked her if she'd seen it. She said the last time she saw it was when I put it on the bed between us. I was baffled. I tore through the room, checking every corner, looking under the bed, behind furniture, and even throwing off all the blankets and sheets, hoping it would fall out. But nothing. I was so confused and frustrated, I told myself I'd find it when we got back. I finished dressing, putting on my scarf and hoodie, and just as I was about to leave, I looked down. And there it was. My phone was sitting right on the bed, exactly where I'd left it, on top of the pile of sheets I'd pulled off. I looked over at my girlfriend and asked, "Where did you find it?" She looked at me, completely puzzled. "Find what?" she said, not understanding. I pointed to the phone and repeated, "My phone. Where did you find it?" She gave me a confused look and said, "I didn't find it." I was stunned. "If you didn't find it, then where did it come from?" She shrugged and said, "I thought you found it." We just stared at each other for a moment, both of us unsure what to make of it. I shrugged and slipped the phone into my pocket. About a month later, the phone disappeared again. This time, it never came back. Looking back, I still get chills thinking about those days. The invisible presence, the strange connect readings, the voice commands activating on their own. It was as if our little apartment wasn't just home to us, but to something else entirely. I don't know what it was, but it definitely left its mark. And honestly, I'm still not sure I want to know the whole story. Hey, I want to share with you a story from when I was about 14 or 15 years old, back around 2004 or 2005. I grew up in the heart of Southwest Virginia, a real country kid through and through. You know how it is, running around outside, exploring the woods, raising hell with the dogs. Well, this one night stands out in my memory like no other. It was the first time my mom and stepdad trusted me to go raccoon hunting alone. That night, just as the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, I grabbed the dogs and headed out. Our hunting grounds were about a 2-mile walk from home, nestled deep in the woods near an old, dilapidated house. That house has its own stories, paranormal stuff, but that's a tale for another time. So I get there, and I let the dogs loose, like I'd done plenty of times before. Usually they'd start barking, baying, picking up scents, but this time, nothing. A few minutes pass, and still silence. I think, okay, maybe they're just taking their time. But as the minutes stretch into half an hour, with no sign of them, my gut starts to twist. It wasn't normal. Our coon dogs weren't the best trackers, true, but even when they couldn't find a raccoon, they'd usually catch onto deer tracks or something else. But this time, nothing. No barks, no rustling, no signs at all. I start walking around, calling their names, my voice echoing softly through the trees. But still, no response. That's when I notice it. The entire ridgeline to my right is glowing with this deep, unnatural red light. It's coming from the other side of the ridge, from the holler. At first, I tell myself it's probably the farmer burning brush, a big old fire. So I decide to check it out, to make sure it's not something dangerous like a forest fire. As I climb closer to the top of the ridge, my skin prickles. The air feels heavy, thick almost. The light isn't flickering like a fire should, and there's no smell of smoke at all. It's this solid, eerie red glow, the kind that reminds me of a stoplight on a dark, lonely road, casting an ominous red tint on everything around it. But here, in the middle of nowhere, a forest and cattle pastures with no electricity for miles. That didn't make any sense. Fear started creeping in, slow and cold. I was carrying my single-shot 20-gauge shotgun with birdshot, mostly for small game, but luckily, I had a few leftover buckshot and slug shells in my pack. I loaded a slug shell as quietly as I could, tucking 2 buckshot shells into my hand. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it might give me away. I knew I had to get out of there, fast. So I backed away carefully, taking the long way around, keeping my eyes on that red glow the whole time. Every step felt heavier than the last. Every shadow seemed to move, and the silence was thick, too thick. When I finally made it back home, I burst inside and told my mom and stepdad about what I'd seen. My stepdad wasn't having any of it. He scolded me for leaving the dogs in the woods, thinking maybe I was just making excuses because I didn't want to chase after them. He didn't believe me at all. Then, about a week later, something else happened. I woke up in the middle of the night and wandered into the living room, still shaken. My stepdad jumped up, eyes wide, and said, "I saw that red light too. It scared me just like it scared you." He told me he'd been hunting near the same area, not exactly the same spot, but close enough, and had seen 3 bright red flashes. They were so bright, he said, they lit everything around him up like someone had turned on a floodlight. Bright enough, he joked, to read a newspaper by. And then, just like that, it was gone. After that, we never saw or heard anything like that red light again. I don't know what I experienced that night, and honestly, it's haunted me ever since. Sometimes, I wish I had walked those extra 25 yards to peek over the ridge and see what was really there. But other times, I'm grateful I didn't. Some things, maybe, are better left in the shadows. Thanks for letting me share that with you. Hey there. Let me share a story from my younger days. Something that's been with me for a long time now. I grew up out in the rural parts of Southwest Virginia, the kind of place where the woods stretch out endlessly, and the night sounds are so loud you can't ignore them. When I was about 14 or 15, not old enough to drive or anything fancy, I spent a lot of my time hunting. We didn't have cable TV or internet back then. Dial-up was the closest thing, and honestly, hunting was my escape, my way to feel alive and connected to the land around me. Now, near where I hunted, there was this old, abandoned house sitting deep in the hollow. It wasn't just any house. It was an old mansion, 2 stories tall with an attic and basement, and it even had slave quarters attached. I remember the basement walls had rusty shackles embedded in the stone, a chilling reminder of a darker past. The house had never had indoor plumbing or electricity, At least, not that I could tell. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades, but strangely, it was still remarkably intact. The windows still held their glass, the floors and walls weren't rotten, and there were no signs of animals nesting inside, which was odd for a place that old and empty. The farmer who owned the land next to us was kind enough to let me hunt on his property, but he always made it clear, stay away from that house. He used it as a storage spot for fence posts and barbed wire, but he didn't want anyone poking around inside. Of course, being a curious teenager, I couldn't resist sneaking a peek, but I was always careful not to disturb a thing. I usually hunted with my stepdad, but sometimes I'd take the coonhounds out on my own. When you're hunting raccoons with dogs, you let them loose and wait for them to chase the animal up a tree. It can take a while, and the chase can zigzag through the woods for miles. While waiting, you often just stand in the dark, no flashlight, because once your eyes adjust, you actually see better without one. The woods get quiet except for the dog's barks and distant sounds of nature. It was during these quiet moments that strange things happened near that old house. On more than one occasion, from the thick darkness, I'd see what looked like a flickering candlelight moving behind the windows of the house. But when we shone spotlights at the windows, there was never anything there. We heard knocks and bumps, like someone moving inside, but we figured it was just animals. Still, the weird part was that even the cows and raccoons kept their distance from the place, making trails that circled around instead of passing close. One evening, I was out hunting squirrels, wearing just a light jacket because the day had been mild. I had wandered nearly 2 miles from home when suddenly the temperature dropped sharply. A fierce wind kicked up, gusting around 30 miles per hour, and I started to feel an intense chill that cut through my clothes. I've camped in 0-degree weather and sat in deer stands for hours, but this cold was different, bone deep and biting. I realized I had to find shelter fast. That old house was the only place nearby. I made my way through the hollow, the wind howling in my ears, and when I stepped inside, the relief was immediate. The walls blocked the wind, and the cold pain in my face and hands started to fade. I felt warmth creeping back into my skin, and for a moment, it was pure comfort. Since I was already inside, I decided to explore again. Upstairs, I found the rooms empty. No furniture, no signs of recent life. The ground floor was mostly the same, except for the farmer's fence gear stored near the front. Then I headed down to the basement. I had a flashlight in my pack just in case, so I flicked it on as I opened the creaking door and stepped down the stairs. The air downstairs was heavy and musty, thick with a silence that made me hold my breath. The walls were bare except for some old shelves and those rusty shackles I'd seen before, still fixed deep in the stone. I reached out, running my fingers along the cold metal chains, and then, suddenly, a loud slam echoed from upstairs. My heart jumped. The house was supposed to be closed up tight, and though the wind was still blowing, I hadn't heard anything like that before. I wanted to tell myself it was just the wind, but the sound was sharp and sudden, like a door being slammed by someone angry or scared. I hurried back upstairs, feeling the atmosphere shift. The warmth I'd felt earlier had drained away, replaced by a cold, heavy feeling, as if the house itself was telling me I wasn't welcome. I didn't need to hear any ghost stories to feel the weight of that place pressing down on me. The wind had calmed a bit by then, but I didn't linger. I left the house and made my way home, the strange cold clinging to me even after I was back outside. That was the most intense experience I had with that old house. It's been over 15 years now since I last visited, and back then, I didn't have a fancy phone or camera to capture any of it. I've thought about going back with some equipment to see if I could record anything, but I'm older now, and I know I'd be trespassing without permission. Plus, out of respect for the farmer who let me hunt there all those years, I wouldn't want to disturb that land or the memories it holds. So, that's my story. some hunting trips, some strange sights and sounds, and a haunted house that still lingers in my mind. Thanks for listening to my tales from the Hollow. Hey, I want to share something that's been on my mind about the restaurant where I work. It's this old place with a lot of history, though I honestly haven't dug into it much myself. The main thing is, there's this banquet room upstairs, up a couple of stairs, and we use it a lot for weddings and parties. It's always buzzing with energy, lots of laughter and clinking glasses during events, but on the quieter nights, it feels different. So, a few weeks after I started working there, around mid-September, I was asked to carry some dishes up to that banquet room to get ready for a wedding. No big deal, right? Just me, a stack of plates, making several trips up the stairs. But every time I'd step into that room, there was this subtle feeling that something wasn't quite right. It wasn't a chill or anything dramatic like goosebumps. It was more like this quiet whisper at the back of my mind telling me, "Hey, pay attention." I didn't think much of it at first, chalked it up to being in work mode, my brain focusing on the job. But I'm one of those people who's pretty in tune with vibes, whether it's from people or places, and I felt that oddity pretty clearly. Maybe I'm just sensitive, or maybe a little nuts. Who knows? Fast forward a couple of weeks to mid-October, and I'm back up there again with more dishes. This time, that feeling is stronger. It's not scary exactly, but it's a gut instinct that something's off. Like the room was holding its breath, waiting for something. After I finished, I went downstairs and, half joking, asked one of the waitresses if she ever felt anything weird up there. Right then, my boss turned the corner and overheard the conversation. The waitress smiled, a little nervous but amused, and said, "Yeah, the building is haunted, especially that banquet room upstairs." She admitted she doesn't like going up there alone. That caught me off guard. My boss then shared some stories. Apparently, a ghost hunting team came through once and captured an EVP where a voice said a bartender's name. There were tales of bar stools flipping over like someone was closing up the bar, but no one was there. And the scariest part? A blood-curdling scream that echoed down a hallway, not even in the banquet room itself. What really chills me is that I felt something was wrong before I even knew the place was haunted. It's like my senses were trying to warn me. I'm still trying to figure out if that feeling was a bad vibe, like the spirit didn't want me there, or just my own nerves getting the better of me. Since finding out about the hauntings, I dread going to work sometimes, because I know I'll have to head upstairs alone again. I make sure I'm never the last to leave the building. I don't want to risk any late-night encounters with whatever might linger there. That gut feeling. I'm convinced now it was a warning. Something in that room is watching, and it prefers not to be alone. It's strange but true, and every time I climb those stairs, I can't help but feel the weight of unseen eyes on me, wondering if I'll be the next to hear a whisper or catch a shadow out of the corner of my eye. I guess some stories are better left untold, but I just had to share this little piece of my world with you. So, a couple of weeks ago, I went to Greyfriars Kirkyard in Edinburgh late at night with one of my closest friends. Let's call her May. It was completely dark, and May was already regretting every decision that had brought her into an ancient graveyard filled with plague pits. I had practically dragged her along because I wanted the full spooky Edinburgh experience. We made our way toward the Black Mausoleum connected to Bloody Mackenzie. After unsuccessfully trying to peer through the cracks in the door, I turned my head and noticed someone moving through the section of the graveyard near the Greyfriars Bobby statue. It was a woman wearing what looked like an old-fashioned white dress, almost Victorian in style. She seemed to be in a real hurry, moving quickly toward the front of the church. At the time, I didn't think too much of it. I assumed May had seen her too, so I didn't mention it. We eventually left the graveyard and headed toward the grass market to find somewhere warm and have a drink. It wasn't until the next morning that something about the woman began bothering me. The more I pictured her, the more I realized there had been something strange about the way she moved. There was none of the natural movement you usually see when someone walks quickly. Her shoulders didn't rise or fall. Her dress didn't sway. There were no footsteps, even though the graveyard had been completely silent. She hadn't looked like she was running. She had looked like she was gliding. So I turned to May and casually said, "You remember that woman we saw in the graveyard last night?" May stared at me. "What woman?" "The one in the white dress," I said, "near the dog statue in front of the church." Her expression changed immediately. She told me to stop trying to frighten her and said she genuinely hadn't seen anyone. Her exact response contained quite a lot more colorful language, but the message was very clear. She did not want to discuss it. So I stopped talking about it. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. There had also been a faint glow around the lower part of the woman's dress. At the time, I assumed she might have been carrying a phone or a torch. But the more I considered it, the less sense that made. A torch would probably have been pointed toward the ground. A phone might have lit her face or her hands. Neither should have made the bottom of her dress appear softly illuminated. I tried to explain the clothing to myself too. Maybe she was a tour guide, dressed in costume, heading home after work. The problem was that it was far too late for any tours. I knew the schedules because I had spent an embarrassing amount of time searching for the latest, darkest, and most frightening ghost tour we could book for the following night. So now I keep replaying the moment in my mind. Was she simply an unusually graceful person? Can someone really walk that quickly without moving their shoulders or making their clothes shift? Did the darkness make an ordinary person seem unnatural? Part of me feels silly even saying it aloud. A mysterious woman in a flowing white dress gliding silently through a graveyard sounds almost too perfect, like something lifted straight from a ghost story. But I know what I saw. Or at least, I know what I think I saw. And no matter how many ordinary explanations I try to give myself, I still can't quite shake the feeling that the woman near Greyfriars Bobby wasn't an ordinary visitor at all. Hi everyone. I lost my dad about 10 weeks ago, and one of the hardest things is that I never had the chance to say goodbye. My dad and I were incredibly close. I cared for him for many years, and during that time, my whole life revolved around making sure he was safe, comfortable, and loved. I put many of my own plans aside, but I never resented him for it. I loved him deeply, and being there for him mattered more to me than anything. Toward the end of his life, he developed dementia, but before it became severe, we still had so many good moments together. We talked for hours, teased each other, shared little jokes, and laughed about things no one else would have understood. Those years created a bond between us that is difficult to put into words. When he passed away, he was staying with my older sister in another country. I wanted desperately to be there, but my travel documents had not been approved, so I had no way to reach him in time. The afternoon he died, he passed peacefully in his sleep. What happened at that exact time still stays with me. I had fallen asleep too, and I dreamed about my dad, my sister, and her family. In the dream, I felt this sudden, powerful need to go to them. It was not an ordinary feeling. It was urgent, almost as though something inside me was calling me to wake up. The moment I opened my eyes, my sister called. She told me that Dad had gone to sleep and never woken up. I was completely shattered. I could not even form a sentence. I remember holding the phone, hearing her voice, but feeling as though the entire world had disappeared around me. I eventually needed prescribed medication just to calm my body down because I could not stop shaking. After he passed, something began happening that brought me comfort. Whenever I cried for him, spoke to him quietly, or asked him to give me strength before I went to sleep, I would often dream about him. Those dreams felt peaceful and vivid. Sometimes he would speak to me. Sometimes he would simply be there, looking healthy and calm. I dreamed about him so often that I started feeling as though our connection had not completely disappeared. At night, I would sometimes light a small candle and talk to him. I know I cannot prove anything, but in those moments, I truly felt as though he could hear me. There were other little things too. I would have a stressful hospital appointment or an overwhelming task to deal with, and somehow everything would fall into place. Someone would offer help at the perfect moment. A problem I had been worrying about would suddenly resolve itself. It felt as though invisible doors were opening for me. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe grief made me search for signs. I honestly do not know. But believing that my dad was still looking out for me gave me strength when I had almost none left. About 5 weeks after he died, my mom suggested that we say a special prayer for him. It was a prayer she knew for loved ones who had passed away. We lit a candle and read it together. Most of it was beautiful, but one part immediately made me uneasy. It said something like, "I will no longer hold on to you or ask anything from you. I will not try to call you back. You are free to enter the light, find peace, and rest." It also said that the living should not keep trying to communicate with those who have died because their souls need to continue their journey. As soon as I read those words, I remember thinking, I am not ready for this part. I know it may sound selfish, but feeling that my dad was still close to me was the one thing helping me survive the grief. I wanted him to be at peace. Of course I did. But I was not ready to feel completely separated from him. Since the night we read that prayer, several weeks have passed. I have not dreamed about him once. I no longer feel that quiet presence around me. I still talk to him sometimes, but now it feels as though my words are disappearing into an empty room. I know my mom meant well, and I do not truly blame her. She had no idea how often I had been dreaming about Dad, or how connected I felt to him after he died. Still, a part of me became angry because everything seemed to change after that prayer. So I keep wondering whether he really had been close to me. Could that prayer have helped him move on? Could I have somehow given him permission to leave, even though my heart was not ready? Has anyone else experienced something like this after losing someone they loved? Have you ever felt their presence strongly, only for it to suddenly disappear? And is it possible to reconnect with that feeling, or do these experiences simply end when they are meant to? Had I known that saying those words might make me stop dreaming about him, I do not think I would have said them so soon. I truly want my dad to be peaceful. I want him to be free from pain, confusion, and everything he suffered near the end. I just wish I could have felt him beside me for a little longer. Thank you for listening. Have you ever gone somewhere that made your body react before your mind even understood what was happening? That's what happened to me near the Whaley House in San Diego, and I'm still trying to make sense of it. I had never done a haunted house tour before. I was curious, excited, and honestly, a little skeptical. I expected some eerie stories, a few creaky floorboards, maybe that nervous feeling you get when someone tells you a place is haunted. I did not expect to feel physically ill. Our guide told us about the Whaley family and explained that Elias Whaley had supposedly built the house near land once used for public executions. The tour took us through several parts of the building, including an old courtroom, a small general store, the dining room, and an upstairs theater. Everything felt normal at first. Then we entered the general store. While the guide was talking about Elias and the history of the family, a powerful headache suddenly came over me. It wasn't a slow, ordinary headache. It felt immediate and heavy, almost as though something were pressing down on the crown of my head. At the same time, my energy completely disappeared. I became nauseous, weak, and strangely exhausted. It felt as though the room were pulling something out of me. I remember standing there, trying to listen to the guide, while quietly wondering whether I needed to leave. As soon as we moved out of the general store, the pressure began to ease. Later, when we entered the theater, some of the sensations returned. They were much milder, but I could still feel that same heaviness and fatigue hovering around me. Once we finally stepped outside, I started feeling better. That was when I realized I was soaked in sweat. The strange thing was, I hadn't felt particularly hot. My partner had been beside me throughout the entire tour, and she looked completely comfortable. She wasn't sweating at all. By the time we reached the car, I felt so drained that I had to lie back in the passenger seat. Before the tour, I had been energetic and excited. Less than an hour later, I felt as though I had been awake for days. I might have dismissed the whole thing as anxiety, dehydration, or the heat. But then, it happened again. Later that evening, we joined another ghost tour that passed through the same neighborhood. I wasn't paying attention to where we were. My eyes were on the pavement because I have a habit of tripping over uneven sidewalks, and I was determined not to become the evening's accidental entertainment. Suddenly, the headache returned. Then came the nausea, the weakness, and that crushing pressure on my head. I looked up. The Whaley house was directly in front of me. We never went inside during the second tour, but we stood close to the property. While we were there, something even stranger happened. The side of my face turned toward the house began dripping with sweat, while the other side was only slightly damp. The temperature didn't feel any different. I didn't feel overheated. Yet the right side of my face, the side facing the building, was completely soaked. When the group moved away from the property, everything gradually faded again. The headache weakened. The nausea settled. My energy slowly returned. I've tried to think of a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe the building had poor ventilation. Maybe I reacted to something in the air. But none of those explanations fully account for why the symptoms returned before I even realized I was approaching the house again. This was the first experience I've ever had that I genuinely cannot explain. I don't know whether it was paranormal, environmental, psychological, or something else entirely. I only know that my body seemed to recognize that place before I did. And ever since then, I've wondered whether anyone else has felt something similar near the Whaley house. Hi, I'm a 21-year-old guy, and I've been trying to understand what's been happening to me lately. It started during my summer break in June. Honestly, that part of the month was wonderful. I reunited with a few friends from school, and we spent our days joking around, playing games, and talking about everything and nothing. The person I'm closest to in that group is Milo. That isn't his real name, but it's close enough. He's currently undergoing military training, and while he's there, he barely has access to his phone. No messages, no social media, nothing. For nearly 5 months at a time, we don't speak at all. Whenever he comes home, though, we meet almost every day. He lives only a few streets away, and those conversations feel like therapy to me. That's why I always become emotional when he has to leave again. Watching how disciplined he was inspired me. I'm really interested in competitive programming, and I decided I wanted to work as hard at coding as he worked during training. There was something comforting about knowing that one of my closest friends was out there pushing himself too. Most of my other friends spend a lot of time online, posting updates and worrying about appearances. Milo was different. He was focused, quiet, and determined. I wanted to become more like that. So, at the beginning of July, I deleted Instagram and Snapchat. Those were the main places where I stayed in touch with people. The first few days were difficult. I kept reaching for my phone without thinking, wanting to see what everyone was doing. But I slowly realized that many of those people weren't really friends. They were simply people I knew. I've always leaned toward being introverted. I don't have close friends at college, so my school group is still the only group where I truly feel comfortable. Whenever everyone leaves for different cities and returns to their own lives, I'm left feeling lonely. It had happened before, but I usually ignored it and carried on. After about 4 days without social media, I began to feel lighter. I was also working harder than ever. At the time, I was doing an internship. Since I wasn't given many tasks, I often spent 3 or 4 hours at the office practicing competitive programming whenever I had free time. I would leave home shortly after 7 in the morning and return around 7 in the evening. Coding occupied nearly every thought I had. During lunch, I would read a difficult problem so I could think about it while eating. I tried to squeeze practice into every spare minute. Competitive programming didn't come naturally to me, and I wanted to improve so badly that I became almost completely consumed by it. When I returned home, I would rest for 20 minutes and then start coding again. Some evenings, there would be an online contest at 8. Those usually lasted around 2 hours. Afterward, I would eat dinner and go to sleep sometime after 11. Then something unusual happened. One night, I went to bed after struggling with a problem I couldn't solve. In my dream, I found myself working on that exact same problem. Somehow, the solution came to me effortlessly. When I woke up, I still remembered the approach. I went over it carefully, and it actually seemed logical. Once I reached the office, I rushed to test it before doing anything else. It worked. I was amazed. That evening, I deliberately studied another difficult problem before going to bed. The same thing happened again. At first, it felt incredible. It was as though my brain continued practicing even while I slept. During this period, though, I was barely speaking to anyone. My family noticed and kept asking whether I was all right. I told them I was fine, and I genuinely believed I was. I loved the feeling of improving every day. But then, without warning, a wave of sadness hit me. I was making my bed one morning when I suddenly started crying. There wasn't any clear reason for it. I walked onto the balcony, stared at the sky, and let the tears fall. I felt overwhelmingly sad, but I couldn't explain why. A few nights later, I had an experience that frightened me more than anything else. I usually sleep through the night without waking up. But that night, I suddenly felt as though someone was crouching beside my bed, staring directly at me. The feeling was so intense that I opened my eyes immediately. There was no one there. Still, the fear remained in my body. My chest felt tight, and I couldn't settle down. After about half an hour, I put in my earphones and played a video because listening to something familiar usually helps me fall asleep after a nightmare. Eventually, I drifted off again. In my dream, I was solving another programming problem. Then the feeling returned. Someone was watching me. Everything became confused. I could see a while loop physically running in front of me, almost as though the code had entered the room. A variable called ind began at 0. I got out of bed and tried to leave my room. But when I stepped through the doorway, I somehow entered the same room again from the opposite side. I know how impossible that sounds. Even now I struggle to describe it. But in that moment, It felt completely real. Every time I tried to leave, the value of ind increased by 1. I panicked and ran through the doorway again and again, only to return to the same room each time. The number kept rising until it reached 1047. It felt endless. It felt like I had been trapped inside a loop with no way to break out. Eventually, I curled up on the bed, hugged my knees, and started crying. I was so terrified that it took me a while to remember I could call someone. I phoned my mother and begged her to come to my room with my sister. When they arrived, I was shaking and crying. I told them we needed to leave the house because I was afraid they might become trapped too. They tried to calm me down and told me I had experienced a very vivid nightmare or a half-awake dream. But at the time, I couldn't accept that. Everything had felt too real. I slept beside my family for the rest of the night. Since then, something inside me has felt different. I haven't wanted to talk to anyone. My sister told me that I was probably exhausted and needed to stop coding for a while, so I followed her advice. I rested. I watched videos, stayed in bed, and sat outside on the balcony. But even while resting, my emotions became unpredictable. I would become furious at videos that weren't remotely offensive. Then I would suddenly feel sad. Sometimes I would laugh at things that weren't funny at all. That isn't normal for me. My mood is usually steady. I've never been someone who reacts strongly to random things online. One morning, while waiting for the bus to work, I heard a bell ringing nearby. I looked around, but there was no bicycle, temple, shop, or anything else that could have produced the sound. Since then, I've occasionally heard things without being able to identify where they're coming from. What happened today finally pushed me to speak about it. I was cleaning the balcony when I began hearing murmurs. Gradually, they sounded like muffled voices of people arguing somewhere in the distance. I couldn't understand the words, but I felt certain that a fight was happening nearby. When I looked outside, I thought I saw several people leaning from their windows and balconies, watching something below. I assumed there must be an argument in the street, but I wasn't completely sure. So I contacted a friend who lives nearby and asked whether she had heard or seen anything. She told me there had been no fight. That left me wondering what I had actually experienced. Were the voices, the people watching from their windows, and the entire scene something my mind created? In the moment, it didn't feel imagined. It felt present and real. These experiences have continued since that night, and I'm frightened by how much my thoughts, emotions, sleep, and perception have changed. I don't know whether this came from loneliness, exhaustion, stress, lack of sleep, or the pressure I placed on myself. I only know that I don't feel like myself anymore, and I think I need help understanding what is happening. I've been hearing strange stories about my grandmother's house since I was little. Almost everyone in my family who has stayed there overnight has experienced something they couldn't explain. Some relatives say they've heard slow footsteps moving through the hallway after everyone was asleep. Others swear they've seen doors open without anyone touching them. But the story that comes up most often is about a shadowy man appearing in different rooms of the house. Those stories terrified me when I was younger, but as I got older, I stopped taking them seriously. Nothing unusual had ever happened to me, so I figured everyone was just influencing one another and turning ordinary sounds into something frightening. Then, a few nights ago, everything changed. It was early Tuesday morning, and I couldn't sleep because I'd taken a long nap that afternoon. I spent most of the night lying in bed, watching videos and letting my mind wander. At around 5:30, I finally put my phone down and decided to try sleeping for an hour before I had to get ready. I closed my eyes, and only a few minutes later, I heard footsteps coming from the direction of the living room. At first, I assumed it was my grandfather getting up early. But the footsteps didn't stop. They moved slowly through the house, coming closer and closer until they seemed to pause directly outside my bedroom. Then I heard something scrape against the floor beside my bed. I remember trying to stay calm. I kept telling myself it was probably a bag shifting or something falling from the nightstand. I didn't want to open my eyes because I was afraid I'd scare myself over nothing. A moment later, I heard my bedroom door creak open. That was when I realized I couldn't move. I tried lifting my arms. I tried turning my head. Nothing worked. What happened next is difficult to explain because everything felt foggy, almost as though I was drifting between being awake and asleep. When I became fully aware again, I was staring straight up at the ceiling. Every time I tried to turn my head, the room seemed to spin in the opposite direction. The dizziness was so intense that I had to stop and breathe. Eventually, I forced myself to look toward the left side of the bed. The spinning stopped immediately. There was a dark figure standing beside me. It had the shape of a person, but something about it felt wrong. It was tall, slightly bent forward, and its face looked strangely stretched. The clearest detail I remember was its nose. It was unusually large and sharp. For a split second, I thought it might be one of my relatives checking on me. Then I realized nobody would be standing silently beside my bed in the dark. I don't know why, but my first reaction was to hit it. Somehow I managed to move one arm. I clenched my fist and swung toward its chest as hard as I could. My hand passed straight through it. The figure suddenly turned its head toward me. Then it smiled. Its teeth were clearly visible, and its eyes looked far too wide, as though it had been waiting for me to notice it. And then, just like that, everything returned to normal. I could move again. I jumped out of bed, switched on the light, and searched the entire room. There was nobody there. The door was still partly open, but the hallway was empty. When I checked my phone, only about 25 minutes had passed. I still haven't told my family. I already know what they'll say. For years, they've insisted that something has been attached to that house. They've also told me an old family story about my grandmother's cousin, Mara. Apparently, she and my grandmother had a serious falling out many years ago, and some relatives believe Mara did something meant to bring bad luck into the home. They say strange things tend to happen whenever she visits, or whenever someone in the family goes to see her. I never believed any of that before. Now, I'm not so sure. Part of me thinks it was sleep paralysis. I had barely slept, so maybe exhaustion caused me to hallucinate. But the footsteps, the door opening, and the feeling of my hand passing through that figure felt painfully real. I honestly don't know what happened to me. All I know is that I no longer laugh when my family talks about the man inside my grandmother's house. Back when I was in college, I worked evenings at a small neighborhood bar. After closing, a few of us would usually stick around for a while. We'd practice making drinks, play a couple of games of pool, clean up slowly, and talk about whatever came to mind. It was the kind of place that felt strangely comfortable after midnight, when the music was off and the doors were locked. One night, sometime after 2 in the morning, 5 of us were still there. There was me, 2 coworkers around my age, 1 guy and 1 girl, and a regular customer I'll call Ren. Out of nowhere, Ren leaned against the bar and said, "Does anyone feel like visiting a haunted house?" We laughed at first, but he was completely serious. He told us about his friend Ray, who had just returned to town. According to Ren, Ray was unusually sensitive to spirits. People said he could see things that most of us couldn't. Ren called him, and after a bit of convincing, Ray agreed to pick us up. There was an abandoned house on the edge of town that almost everyone knew about. I'll call it the Hoshida House. It stood apart from the surrounding homes, with empty lots on either side. A tall iron fence circled the property, and the yard was buried beneath weeds. Near the porch, there was an old red wagon lying on its side and a rusted swing that moved whenever the wind picked up. Nobody had lived there for a very long time. Still, people claimed they saw shapes moving behind the upstairs windows. Others said they heard someone crying inside late at night. But the warning everyone repeated was always the same. Never cross the fence. Because once you stepped onto the property, something might follow you home. On the drive there, we passed another place that was supposed to be haunted. As we went by, I noticed Ray staring through the window. Then he smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It looked more like he had recognized someone standing outside. I nearly asked him what he was looking at, but something in my stomach told me to stay quiet. Ray barely spoke for the rest of the drive. When we reached the Hoshida house, we parked across the street and walked slowly along the outside of the fence. At first, nothing happened. No footsteps, no voices, no faces in the windows. My female co-worker and I stood near the gate, looking at the old wagon in the yard. We whispered that maybe the stories had been exaggerated. Honestly, I was already thinking about going back to the bar. Then my other co-worker, whom I'll call Kai, rubbed his hands together and said, "Well, I guess somebody has to go inside." We all told him not to. I said, "That's still private property. We could get arrested." Kai laughed and said, "It's not much of a ghost hunt if we stay on the sidewalk." Before anyone could stop him, he walked over to the fence. He gripped the top rail and started pulling himself up. The moment his feet left the ground, Ray rushed forward. He wrapped both arms around Kai's waist and dragged him down with so much force that they nearly fell onto the pavement. Ray didn't look at Kai. He didn't even look toward the house. He just said, "We're leaving. Get in the car." There was something in his voice that made all of us listen. Even Kai stopped joking, although he complained quietly during the drive back. When we returned to the bar, we stood together in the darkened room. Finally, someone asked Ray, "What did you see?" He didn't answer right away. For several seconds, he simply stared at Kai. Then he said, "As soon as you started climbing, a man appeared on the other side of the fence." Kai went pale. Ray continued, "He was standing directly in front of you. His face was very close to yours." He paused and swallowed. His eyes were completely black. Nobody spoke. Ray said, "If you had leaned forward just a little more, you would have gone straight into him." Kai asked, "What would have happened?" Ray slowly shook his head. "I don't know. But he wasn't trying to scare you away." His voice became quieter. "He wanted you to come closer. He was waiting for you to cross. That's why I pulled you back." I never visited the Hoshida house again, and as far as I know, it's still there. Still empty. Still waiting behind that fence. I was 16 when this happened, and even now, years later, I can still remember every detail. At the time, my mom and my stepmother had bought an old duplex together. My bedroom was on the top floor, tucked beneath the slanted attic roof, with my sister's room directly across the hallway. It was a quiet Sunday morning. I was still in bed, half awake, scrolling through music on my old MP3 player, when I suddenly heard footsteps. They were loud. Not normal footsteps either. They sounded like someone was charging up the stairs, taking them two at a time. The whole staircase seemed to shake beneath the weight of them. I immediately stopped what I was doing and stared at my bedroom door. For a few seconds, I wondered whether whoever was coming upstairs was heading toward my room or my sister's. Then my door flew open. My mom stood in the doorway. She was wearing the long burgundy nightgown she loved, along with a pair of worn, fuzzy house slippers. Her hair was tangled around her face, and she looked angrier than I had ever seen her. She started shouting at me. The strange thing was, I knew the words were supposed to be English. The rhythm sounded right. Her voice sounded exactly like hers. But no matter how closely I listened, I could not understand a single thing she was saying. It was complete nonsense. When she stopped, I quietly apologized and asked her to repeat herself. That only made her angrier. She shouted again, louder this time, but the words still made no sense. It sounded almost as though someone had learned how to imitate human speech without understanding language. I remember feeling guilty because she clearly wanted something from me. I wanted to help her, but I genuinely could not understand her. So I asked one more time, "Mom, I'm sorry. I don't know what you're saying." She let out this low, frustrated sound, almost like a growl. Then she threw her arms down, turned sharply, and ran out of my room. I heard her footsteps racing down the stairs. I jumped out of bed and followed her. I went down one floor, then another, expecting to find her furious about something. Instead, I found my mom sitting calmly in the living room. She was wearing navy pajama shorts and a faded white tank top. She had a cup of coffee in one hand and was watching television as though nothing had happened. When she noticed me, she smiled. "Morning," she said. "Did you sleep okay?" I just stood there staring at her. Eventually, I sat beside her and asked what she had needed from me upstairs. Her smile disappeared. She said she had not gone upstairs. She had been sitting in the living room for nearly an hour. I asked why she had changed her clothes. That was when she started looking genuinely worried. She told me she had been wearing the same outfit all morning. I explained everything: the footsteps, the door opening, the nightgown, the shouting, and the words I could not understand. At the time, she insisted I must have been dreaming. She said maybe I had experienced some kind of waking hallucination and told me not to talk about it anymore. For years, that was the explanation she held on to. Then, not long ago, I brought it up again. This time, she admitted that she had always believed me. She said the detail that frightened her most was the bedroom door. It had a habit of sticking, and it took real force to open it quickly. When I told her it had slammed open, she knew I had not simply imagined a shadow standing in the hallway. She confessed that the thought of something copying her face, her clothes, and her voice had scared her so badly that she needed to convince herself it had never happened. But it did happen. And it was not the only strange experience I have had. When I was younger, my stepsister and I saw something in the woods during a camping trip in northern Vermont that neither of us could explain. Years later, while walking into work for an overnight shift, I suddenly had a vivid image flash through my mind. It frightened me so much that I stopped walking. A moment later, a delivery van turned the corner. Its headlights illuminated a large mountain lion crouched beside the sidewalk, less than 15 feet away from me. The light startled it. It sprang into the air, twisted around, and disappeared behind a row of houses. Had I kept walking, I would have passed directly in front of it. I have experienced many things that sound impossible when spoken aloud. Some happened when I was alone. Others happened with witnesses. A few were even captured on video. I understand that some people will think I am exaggerating, lying, or imagining things. That does not bother me anymore. I know what I saw. My siblings know what they saw too. And once you experience something that completely changes your understanding of what is possible, you stop needing everyone else to believe you. Hi everyone. I wanted to share something that happened to me because, honestly, I still don't know what to make of it. I've gone over it so many times in my head, and I keep coming back to the same feeling. Whatever I ran into that night did not feel like a normal person. This happened in the summer of 2023. For a little bit of context, I've had strange experiences for most of my life. I grew up feeling pretty sensitive to spiritual things, and I still think I am. I also live in a town in Oregon that's built on ancestral indigenous land, and I do feel like that matters. There's a certain heaviness in some places here, especially in my neighborhood. I've had weird things happen around this area before, but this one shook me more than anything else. At the time, I was 18, and I was riding my longboard home from my boyfriend Aaron's house. It was around 4 in the morning, so it was still completely dark and quiet. The route home took me past an elementary school, and that school has always felt strange to me at night. I can't really explain it, but the air there feels different, like the whole street is holding its breath. I was riding down the road in front of the school, and I swear there was nobody around. It was one of those empty neighborhood streets where you can hear every little wheel sound, every crack in the pavement, every leaf moving. I looked down for maybe 1 second, maybe not even that long, and when I looked back up, there was suddenly a man standing directly in front of me. I mean directly in front of me. I almost hit him. I was maybe a few inches away from slamming right into him. He was just standing there in the middle of the street, like he had been dropped there out of nowhere. I didn't see him walking up. I didn't see him coming from the sidewalk. He was just there. I stopped so fast I nearly fell off my board. I grabbed it and I looked at him, ready to apologize. But the second I really saw him, this deep fear hit me. Not normal fear. Not I almost ran into a stranger fear. It was something older than that. My whole body reacted before my mind could catch up. His face was wrong. I don't know how else to describe it. It looked almost human, but not quite. Like the features were arranged correctly, but something behind them wasn't working. His expression was completely blank, and his eyes didn't seem focused on me. It was like he was staring through me instead of at me. I blurted out something like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't even see you, what the hell?" And he didn't react. Not even a flinch. He didn't seem startled that I had almost crashed into him. He didn't answer me. He didn't blink in any way that felt natural. He just stood there, empty and still, like I wasn't even part of what was happening. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. I wanted to leave. Every part of me was screaming to get away, but I was frozen. Then I finally took a couple steps to the side, still watching him, and that's when he started walking. But even the way he walked was wrong. It was stiff and mechanical, almost like he was copying the motion of a person walking without actually understanding it. His pace was strange, too steady, too controlled, like a wind-up figure moving down the road. I always thought that if something creepy ever happened to me, I'd be smart about it. I'd run. I'd get out of there immediately. But in the moment, I just stood there watching him because my brain couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Once he got a little farther away, I started walking quickly in the opposite direction, still keeping my eyes on him. I didn't want to look away at all. But then I came to this part of the street where the trees cover the street lamp, and it gets really dark. I was already terrified, so I glanced forward for just a second to make sure nothing else was ahead of me. When I looked back, he was gone. Completely gone. There wasn't anywhere obvious he could have gone that fast. The only real option would have been crossing toward the school parking lot, but he would have had to move impossibly quickly to get out of sight in that tiny amount of time. He appeared out of nowhere, and then he disappeared the same way. I don't know what he was. I don't know if he was some kind of spirit, something pretending to be human, or just something I don't have a name for. I've had ghost experiences before, but this felt different. This didn't feel like a normal haunting. This felt like my body recognized danger before I did. So I guess I'm sharing this because I want to know if anyone else has experienced something like this. Have you ever seen a person who didn't feel like a person? Because I still think about that night, and I still can't convince myself that what I saw was human. Hey, I want to share a memory from when I was about 10 years old. We were spending our summer vacation at my grandma's house. You know, the one we call Nani. Those 2 months are some of the most vivid parts of my childhood, mostly because of something pretty unsettling that happened. So, Nani lives in this village where there used to be these huge bamboo plantations, like a mini forest starting right from her backyard and stretching out into the distance. Back then, those bamboos were thick and tall, but now, well, they're gone. Around a month into our stay, there was a wedding nearby. Everyone was busy. My parents, cousins, uncles, aunts, even my grandpa. My older brother was off playing with our cousin brothers. That left me and Nani together because I wasn't feeling too great. We weren't exactly alone. There were some distant relatives around, but I barely knew them. So, I stuck close to Nani. It was night, and the front yard was lit by a few lanterns hanging from poles. There was also a faint bulb glowing in one of the rooms. We had this bamboo cot right outside, and Nani was sitting there with me on her lap. The music from the wedding was faint in the background, but the crickets were louder. The night breeze was cool, even though it was summer, and it was just the right setting for a nap. I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember was hearing a whisper right by my ear. I thought it was someone calling my name. Honestly, I don't remember the exact word, but I was sure it was my name. When I opened my eyes, Nani wasn't there. I was alone on that cot, surrounded by darkness except for where the lanterns lit up. Then, I heard the voice again. Curious, I stood up and peeked inside the house to see where Nani had gone. But then, I heard the voice coming from the backyard. I could also hear the bamboo stalks rubbing together, like in a storm, but the weather was calm. Now here's where my 10-year-old bravery, or stupidity, kicked in. I decided to go see who it was. No lantern, no backup, just me thinking it was a cousin playing a prank. The backyard was dim and shadowy. I called out, "Who's there?" a few times. Then, I saw it. A tall, dark figure peeking from behind one of the bamboo stalks. It stood as tall as the bamboo itself. Even now, I get chills thinking about how clear that image is in my mind. I called out again, but it didn't move. The backyard was so quiet, except for the wind that seemed stronger than the night's weather should have allowed. Fear started creeping in. I realized how foolish it was to be there alone. I didn't shout this time. Instead, I tried to step back toward the front yard. But every time I took a step back, I heard the leaves rustle, like the figure was stepping closer. I froze. My heart was pounding, sweat trickling down. I closed my eyes tight, and that's when someone grabbed me from behind. It was Nani, holding a lantern, scolding me for wandering off. I opened my eyes, hugged her, tears streaming down my face, and pointed to the bamboo where the figure had been. She shone the lantern there, but there was no one. Whoever or whatever it was, it had vanished. She picked me up and took me inside. I was still crying, and she said she heard me shouting and came looking for me. After freshening me up, she asked if I was sure I wasn't dreaming or sleepwalking. I insisted I wasn't. Then she told me she hadn't heard a child talk about something like this in years, and she warned me never to go into the backyard alone again, not even during the day. And that's the story of the shadow behind the bamboo. Even now, I wonder what it was, but I'm just glad Nani was there when I needed her. I've had a few moments with my daughter that I still don't really know how to explain. One day, I was alone in the car with her. She was still tiny, sitting in her car seat, fussing a little the way babies do when they're uncomfortable or tired. Nothing had been playing through the car audio. No music, no podcast, nothing. And then, out of nowhere, the speaker started playing a woman's voice. It said something like, "She's been sitting in her seat too long." When I looked at the display, both the title and the artist just said, "Unknown." Then it stopped. Nothing played before it, nothing played after it, and honestly, it didn't feel scary. It was strange, absolutely, but not scary. More like the air had briefly opened a tiny door and then shut it again. Another time, I walked into the playroom where my daughter was in her playpen. The TV had been on, but it was asleep on the home screen. Suddenly, it started playing a song. It sounded like a rock band with a male lead singer, and the lyrics were something about looking around and seeing the invisible in the room. I distinctly remember the word shadows being repeated, maybe in the chorus. I'm not saying it was about shadow people or anything like that. I just know that word was in there. The weird part is, I don't even know how to make that TV play music. The screen never changed from the home screen either. I searched for that song for over an hour and a half right after it happened, when the lyrics were still fresher in my mind, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And that's another strange thing. With moments like that, the details start slipping away so quickly. I have a good memory, and when something shocks me, I usually write it down right away. But with this, it's like the words get foggy almost immediately. There have also been little things with the baby monitor. I always seem to wake up right before my daughter does. Not after she cries, not because she makes noise. I just wake up and check the monitor. One night, around 1 in the morning, I woke up with this strong feeling that the sound on the iPad baby monitor app wasn't working. My daughter had been sleeping through the night by then, so my husband Darren was annoyed when I woke him up and asked him to fix it. But he did. We got the sound working again, and about 5 minutes later, she sat up and started crying. Her wake-ups aren't predictable. They happen at different times, and when I wake up, she's usually still sound asleep. Her room is soundproofed enough that we don't accidentally wake her, so it isn't like I'm hearing her stir through the walls. Recently, twice, I've heard a little voice say, "Mommy, Mommy," through the baby monitor. But my daughter can't say those words yet. And both times, when I looked, she was visibly asleep. Then shortly after, she woke up. Maybe this next part is just in my head, but when I see her stirring on the monitor at night, if I really focus on her and sort of tell her, silently, that I love her, that I'm here, and that she can go back to sleep, she does. Almost every time. I know that sounds like a tired mother looking for patterns, and maybe that's all it is. I'm a stay-at-home mom right now, so I've always assumed I just know her rhythms better than anyone else. Intuition, pattern recognition, closeness. All of that makes sense. But then something happened recently that made me pause. We met up with one of my husband's friends and their family. They have a child close to my daughter's age, and it was only the second time we'd all spent time together. Before we left, one of the parents looked at me and said something like, "I have to tell you, I've never experienced anything quite like her. I thought this the first time too, but I wanted to be sure before I said anything strange. She feels almost telepathic. She just looks at you, and you know exactly what she needs, like down to specifics." That caught me off guard, because that's how it has always felt to me. I just thought that was because I'm her mother. There was one silly little thing too, though it still sticks in my mind. One day, while my daughter was lying on me nursing and sleeping, I clicked into HBO. She hates when I move, so I was trying not to disturb her. Instead of opening to the last thing we'd watched, it took me directly to an episode of Euphoria called Stand Still and See. That wasn't the last episode watched. It wasn't even the last show watched on HBO. The home screen had been showing something completely different as the most recent thing. And my husband doesn't watch Euphoria. I don't know what any of this means. I'm not trying to make it into something bigger than it is. None of it has felt dark or threatening. It's just strange. Little moments. Voices from speakers. Songs I can't find. Words that disappear from my memory too quickly. Waking before she wakes. Hearing "mommy" before she can say it. And this quiet feeling that, somehow, my daughter and I are tuned to the same invisible station. I heard this story years ago from an elderly night watchman who had worked in Hong Kong back in the early 80s. He was not the sort of man who dressed things up. He did not lower his voice or lean in dramatically. He simply told it the way a person tells you about an old scar, quietly, carefully, and with the feeling that he wished the memory had stayed buried. He said it happened in Admiralty, around 1982. At that time, the whole district was changing. Old lanes were being cleared away. New office towers were climbing into the sky. Shopping arcades, footbridges, underground passages, and MTR entrances were appearing everywhere. Hong Kong was becoming sharper, brighter, more modern. But there was one newly finished commercial building that people whispered about before it had even opened. From the street, it looked grand enough. Glass, concrete, polished metal, all very clean and respectable. But some of the older workers said the land underneath it had a rotten history. They claimed that decades earlier, sometime in the 50s, there had been a hidden place nearby where children were kept and sold. Families had searched the district with faded photographs. Missing posters had been pasted on walls and lampposts. Some children simply vanished and were never found. During construction, the workers supposedly uncovered little pieces of bone in the foundation. Nobody official said much about it. The tower was finished anyway. Before the offices opened and the shops moved in, several guards were hired to watch the empty building at night. One of them was a man named Lau King. He had answered a small newspaper advertisement, nothing unusual. Just night security, decent pay, quiet hours. The other guards included old Uncle Han, who had done this kind of work for years, a round-faced fellow everyone called Big Wah, and another man nicknamed Mr. Tsim Sha Chui, because he always talked about moving there one day. One night, the four of them sat together in the security room and cooked hot pot on a little electric stove. That detail always stayed with me. Not because it is frightening, but because it feels so human. Four tired men in an empty tower, filling the midnight air with steam, broth, jokes, and the smell of food so the silence would not feel so large. Then every CCTV monitor turned to snow. At that same moment, Mr. Tim Sa Choi reached for his throat. He made a choking sound and fell from his chair. They tried to help him, but it was too late. The explanation later was that a small bone fragment had somehow lodged in his windpipe. A freak accident, they said. But the other guards swore that just before the screens went blank, they saw something on one monitor. A child. A little boy wearing red. A few days after that, Uncle Han died at home. His neighbors heard banging and clattering from his kitchen, then nothing. When the police got inside, they found him on the floor beside the stove. The metal around the burners was scorched black, as if fire had burst out from inside the appliance itself. And in the soot, there were tiny handprints. A Taoist priest was asked to come. He said the stove was more than a place for cooking. In a home, it carried the warmth of the family. It was the mouth of life. If something forced its way through that place, then what entered might not be easy to send back. Then the priest looked at Lao King's birth details. His face changed. He told Lao that he had been born under a deeply yin alignment. Yin year, yin month, yin day, yin hour. His wife was pregnant too, and whatever was inside that tower, the priest said, was not really hunting Lao. It wanted the baby. Big Wah was the next to go. He quit the job, packed quickly, and tried to leave Hong Kong for a while. But while driving through a tunnel late at night, his car slammed into the wall. When the authorities checked the footage, the back seat seemed empty. Until one frame. Just one frame showed a red blur behind him. After 3 deaths, the tower's opening was delayed. By then, everyone had a different explanation. Some said the spirits of the missing children were angry. Some said they wanted justice. Others said one child had stayed too long in the dark and had become something else entirely, something that no longer remembered what justice meant. Then the building became worse. Guards began seeing a boy in red reflected in elevator doors. Never directly, only in mirrored surfaces, glass panels, polished metal. The fountain outside the lobby supposedly showed his reflection after midnight, even when no one was standing there. Down in the basement, men heard nursery songs drifting through the corridors, sung by many thin little voices that did not quite match each other. And the elevators kept moving by themselves, always downward, always to B3. The priest told Lao King there was one final way to stop it. He had to seal 3 hidden geomantic gates inside the tower, and he had to destroy the stove in his own home before the thing could use it. But by then, Lao's wife had begun to change. Her skin became pale. Her mouth looked too red. At night, she moved furniture into strange positions and screamed whenever Lao tried to put things back. When he lifted a hammer to smash the stove, she held her stomach and begged him to stop. She cried that he was hurting their unborn child. And Lao stopped. A few days later, the priest was found barely alive. Before he died, he left one message. The bones were in the storm drain on B3. Seal them with blood. So Lao went down alone. He said the basement air was greenish, damp, and heavy. At the end of the corridor stood Mr. Tsim Sha Chui, dead and silent, raising one hand as if calling him closer. Then the elevator doors opened behind him. Children were laughing inside. A little boy in red stepped out. He was smiling much too widely. Lao found the drain. Inside were small, dry bones, brittle as old twigs. He cut his palm and let the blood drip down over them. The boy stopped laughing. Then he whispered, very softly, "At last, your blood belongs to me." Soon after that, Lao's wife went into labor. She gave birth to a child. Whether that child was truly human, nobody could ever say. But for years afterward, guards in that tower claimed the elevators still returned to B3 on their own. Pregnant women said they felt faint inside the mall. Some people reported hearing a child humming just behind their shoulder, close enough to feel the breath, but when they turned around, no one was there. Today, the place is bright, busy, and perfectly ordinary from the outside. But if you are ever in Admiralty, and an elevator begins descending without anyone pressing the button, I would step out before it reaches B3. I've had a number of encounters over the years. Some people might call them contact sessions, downloads, messages, or spiritual interactions. But honestly, all of those words feel a little too small for what it really is. To me, it's less about reaching out to something unknown and more about remembering what you already are: eternal, connected beyond place, not limited by time in the way we usually think. There are so many methods people talk about for making contact with the other side. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. And I don't doubt that many of those people are sincere. But from my own experience, some of those methods can make the whole thing feel more complicated than it needs to be. The first real requirement, at least as I understand it, is simple. You have to genuinely want to know. Not out of curiosity alone, not because you want proof on command, not because the ego is stamping its little paperwork and demanding answers by noon. You have to truly want to connect with the phenomenon, with that presence, with whatever name feels closest to the truth for you. And that becomes much easier when you stop asking from fear, control, or ego. There has to be surrender. There has to be an understanding that there is more beyond what we usually see, and that this more is not cold or distant. It feels familiar. It feels like something that has known us longer than we have known ourselves. I believe there is a presence that wishes to interact with human beings who sincerely wish to interact with it. That sincere intention is the cornerstone. From there, it takes practice, intention, repetition. It's a little like tuning an old radio in the dark. At first there's static, then a tone, then something clear enough to recognize. On this plane, I believe there are two main frequencies. One is doubt-based, restless, mechanical. I sometimes think of it as the old ego system. It runs on imaginary time, dragging guilt from yesterday and anxiety from tomorrow. The ego wants proof immediately. It wants answers now. It wants the mystery to stand under fluorescent lights and empty its pockets. But the deeper self, the one connected to the other side, doesn't work that way. It responds when it is called with honesty and followed with trust. It is not linear. It is patient. It does not insist. It does not shout over you. It simply responds to true intent. Those who learn to align with that frequency and who learn to tell the difference between the ego's noise and the self's quiet signal will begin to notice things. Maybe orbs. Maybe repeated numbers appearing in sets of 3 or more, like 111, 333, 777. Maybe goosebumps, but the good kind. The kind that feel like confirmation passing through the body. And eventually, for some, the signs may deepen. Dreams that feel more real than waking life. Memories that don't seem to belong to this lifetime. Fragments from before this body, before this earth, before the little story we usually call me. There are ways to make this easier, though it remains deeply personal. For me, the hours before dawn have always felt especially open. The world is quieter then. The usual machinery of thought has softened. Nature helps too. Trees, green places, stillness, and water most of all. Rivers, lakes, oceans, even the sound of rain. Water seems to carry something. It quiets the mind and sharpens the unseen. Why? Because this reality, in some sense, behaves like an electromagnetic field. And during the night, when the outer world rests and the great machine seems to sleep, that presence becomes easier to sense. The same is true around trees and water. They seem to hold a cleaner signal. So my advice is simple. Seek sincerely. Then listen. From ancient times until now, what was true has remained true. The world has always had an illusory quality. Many people sense it, even if they don't know how to describe it. Believer or not, almost everyone has felt at some point that something about this place is strange, incomplete, or not quite what it appears to be. And I'll say this again because it matters. What was true yesterday is still true today. What you are seeking is also seeking you. You were never truly alone. You were only distracted. So step away from the vibration of second guessing. Let doubt pass without letting it lead. Trust the enduring reach of your own consciousness. It can go farther than you were taught. And those who seek truthfully, with an open heart and honest intent, will be answered when they allow themselves to receive it. I'm grateful I've never personally seen anything as terrifying as what my sister has. I'll be honest with you, I've always been the nervous one. I'm the kind of person who hears a noise at night and immediately becomes a statue under the blanket. But my twin sister, Lena, has had strange experiences for years. To give you a little background, we grew up around my grandparents' old house. It was built sometime in the early 1900s, and it had that heavy, quiet feeling old houses sometimes have, like the walls were holding on to things nobody had said out loud in a long time. We later found out that a family who lived there before my grandparents had gone through a terrible house fire, and their young daughter had died in it. But we didn't know any of that when my sister had her first experience. We were about 12 at the time. Lena said she woke up in the middle of the night and saw a little girl beside her bed. She had braids, and she was pretty, almost gentle looking. Her arms were resting on the mattress, and her chin was on top of them, like she was just quietly watching my sister sleep. Lena said the girl was very close. At first, she didn't understand what she was seeing. Then it hit her that this little girl should not have been there. She shut her eyes tight, grabbed onto her blanket, and didn't move. She said the girl didn't feel evil or angry, but just knowing she wasn't supposed to be in that room scared her badly. A few days later, she finally told my grandparents. They said they had never seen anything themselves, but then my uncle, who was only a few years older than us, admitted that he and his girlfriend, who is now his wife, had experienced strange things in that house too. One evening, my uncle was getting ready to go out while his girlfriend waited in the living room. When he came out of the bathroom, she asked him if he had left the water running. He heard it too, so he went back to check. The sink was off. They stood there confused, and then, right before they were about to leave again, they heard the water running a second time. He went back, and this time, the faucet really was on. My uncle has always been the kind of person who tries to find a logical reason for everything, so he didn't make a big deal out of it. But still, it was strange. As the years went on, Lena kept telling our parents things like, "I heard something," or "I saw a shadow in the hallway." My mom never had any paranormal experiences herself, so she usually told Lena it was because she watched too many ghost shows and scary videos. But then Lena started working at a department store in the mall, and the experiences followed her there. She worked at the customer service counter on the 3rd floor. During closing, she usually had to let the other employees out, then wait for the manager and the security guard. That meant she was often one of the only people left in that huge store. At first, she would hear hangers clinking together, even though nobody was supposed to be near the racks. She tried to ignore it. She told herself it was just the building settling, or echoes from earlier in the day. But then one night, while she was closing, she heard noises coming from the offices behind the counter. She asked the security guard to check and make sure nobody was back there before they left. He looked straight at her and said, "Get your stuff. Let's go." That scared her more than the noise did. She asked him again, "What if someone is hiding back there?" And he just said, "Ignore it. Let's go." So they left. Another time, she went into the break room by herself to eat. There was a storage room inside where they kept mannequins, displays, and extra supplies. She had just heated up her food and sat down when she heard the storage room door creak. Then it opened a little. She froze, waiting for someone to walk out. Nobody did. She grabbed her food and left as fast as she could. She said she had chills all over her body, not just from fear, but from that deep, wrong feeling you get when your body knows something is off before your mind catches up. She knew the woman who worked with the security cameras, so later she asked if anyone had gone into that storage room before her and never came out. The woman checked and said no one had gone in, but on the footage, they could see the door open by itself. After that, Lena refused to eat in the break room unless other people were there. And those hangers I mentioned before, they became part of another experience. One night, she was walking down the aisle with the manager and security guard after closing. She was already nervous every time she had to close, so she always stayed close to them. She said she was walking in the middle, between both of them, nowhere near the racks. Then suddenly, her purse got caught on a hanger. They laughed and joked that maybe the ghost wanted her to stay, but Lena didn't think it was funny. To her, it just added another layer to everything that had already been happening. Another night, she was training a new customer service employee. The customer service area was wide, with hallways on both sides leading back toward the offices. There was also a meeting room off to one side. They were getting ready for the last few hours of the shift when suddenly, from inside the meeting room, they heard a loud crash. Then more noise. It sounded like chairs and tables being shoved around, maybe even thrown. Like someone in there was furious. But there was no meeting scheduled. Nobody was supposed to be inside. Lena knew immediately that something wasn't right, but she tried to act calm because the new girl was curious and wanted to go look. Lena told her, "Don't go in there. Just ignore it." The girl kept wondering if maybe someone was inside, and Lena finally said, "If you go in there and something happens, I'm grabbing my stuff and running, so please, just leave it alone." They kept working and never talked about it again. But the experience that really pushed Lena to her limit happened while she was closing with an older coworker who had trained her. Lena liked working with her. She felt comfortable around her. They were closing their registers. Lena was on one far side of the counter, and the other woman was on the opposite side. All of a sudden, the woman screamed. Lena rushed to ask if she was okay, but the woman had gone pale. She looked terrified and didn't want to say what she had seen. Lena kept asking because she knew she was supposed to stay there by herself after the woman left. Finally, the coworker told her there had been a man near Lena. She said he looked wrong somehow, and he was leaning toward Lena like he was about to whisper something directly into her ear. That was it for my sister. She was so shaken that she practically begged the woman to stay and close with her. After that, Lena decided she couldn't keep working there anymore and started looking for another job. As for me, I only have one experience, and it happened a couple of weeks ago. It was a Sunday. My parents and Lena had gone to the hospital so my dad could get checked out, and I stayed home with my brother. We were asleep in the TV room, which has a clear view into the kitchen. At some point, I woke up because I heard something. I'm still not sure if I was half dreaming or fully awake, but I thought I saw a figure move into the kitchen. At first, I assumed my parents had come home, but I kept listening, and I kept watching the kitchen, and slowly I realized there was no one there. I got scared, so I turned around and hugged my brother. 4 days later, my mother passed away. I don't know if what I saw had anything to do with that. I can't say for sure, but it has stayed with me, quietly sitting in the back of my mind ever since. Those are some of the strange things my family has experienced, and even now, I still don't know what to make of all of it. Hi, so I want to tell you about something that stayed with me in a way I still don't fully know how to explain. My experience is tied, at least partly, to having an open mind about reincarnation. Not just the usual idea of a past life, but things like ancestral return, inherited memory, or that strange feeling that something old in your bloodline is somehow still speaking. I know those are big concepts, and people can look them up if they want the deeper explanations, but the simple version is this. I recently uncovered what may have been a past life, or maybe some kind of spiritual connection to an ancestor. And honestly, it was probably one of the least comforting possibilities I could have imagined. I'm a man in my early 40s, and not long ago, I went through the end of a relationship. Nothing supernatural seemed to be happening at first. It was just the normal mess of heartbreak, sadness, disappointment, regret, anger, all of it. But those emotions seemed to open some hidden door in me. Out of nowhere, I started thinking about one very specific man in my family tree. I barely knew anything about him. Just a few census records, a couple of military index entries, the bare bones of a life. I knew he had lived in Baltimore County, Maryland during the Civil War, and that he had served with the 7th Maryland Volunteers in the Union Army. That was about it. I live in Maryland too, though in a different county. Most of my older family came from Baltimore or nearby areas, not from the part of Maryland where I grew up. So this man wasn't someone I had grown up hearing stories about. He wasn't family lore. He was just a name on paper. But after that breakup, he came to mind with this strange urgency. It felt almost like waking up with the sudden need to call someone. Not casually, urgently. Like something was pressing on my shoulder. At first, I thought maybe I was just looking for a distraction from feeling miserable. And honestly, that would have made sense. Research can be a shelter when your heart is making too much noise. But the feeling kept getting sharper. It didn't feel random. It felt connected to what I was feeling, in a way I couldn't name yet. So I started digging into this relative, Jonas Thomas Kelbaugh, who lived from 1840 to 1908. Now, I should say this part clearly. I'm trained in genealogical research. I have a certificate in it, a graduate degree in library science, and years of experience working with records, archives, and family history. So when I research, I'm not trying to force a story onto the evidence. I don't like bending facts until they fit feelings. But what I found was strange, because the facts started echoing my emotions. Jonas had enlisted in the Union Army, and from what I could piece together, it may have been partly because he wanted approval to court the woman he later married, Bethany Ann Schaefer. Bethany had already been treated as a source of shame in her family because she had a child outside of marriage, and the man involved never married her. Her father was protective of her, maybe even fiercely so, and he was also a strong Union supporter. He believed the rebellion had to be put down by force. Jonas worked as a stonemason and spent time on his uncle's farm in Carroll County, Maryland. That uncle lived near Bethany's father, and Jonas appears to have done some work around the Schaefer farm too. So I began to see the shape of it. A young man, trying to prove himself, trying to become acceptable in the eyes of the woman's family. He enlisted in August of 1862. He joined Company D of the 7th Maryland Volunteers, alongside neighbors and relatives. Soon after, he marched toward the front, not long after the Battle of Antietam. But after several months, whatever noble or romantic reason had carried him into the army seemed to collapse under the reality of war. He had likely seen frightening action during the Confederate retreat after Antietam. Then winter came. Christmas came. Homesickness must have pressed down hard, and Jonas deserted. He left with a small group of other soldiers and made the long journey back home, roughly 70 miles or so. To avoid being caught, he hid out near his uncle's farm, close enough to Bethany that he could reconnect with her. From what I can tell, he presented himself as if his enlistment had simply ended. But it hadn't. He was absent without leave, and by the spring of 1863, he was officially listed as a deserter. Jonas and Bethany married on July 19th, 1863. By then, he was working with her father and trying to build some kind of future, possibly earning an interest in the farm through his labor. For a while, maybe the war felt far away, out there in the countryside. But his name was circulating on deserter lists. Someone may have informed on him, possibly even another man connected to Bethany's past. In April of 1864, Jonas was arrested. He was court-martialed and sentenced to 1 year of imprisonment at Fort Delaware. Part of his punishment was being forced to wear a ball and chain, and the part that truly stopped me cold was this. His prison sentence began on July 19th, 1864, his first wedding anniversary. That was when something in me just went quiet. The loss, the shame, the anger, the helplessness, the feeling of being separated from someone you love right when you thought your life was beginning again. It was all too close to what I had been feeling. Not identical in circumstance, of course, but emotionally, it struck the same deep bell. And I discovered this on the 160th anniversary of his imprisonment. That detail still unsettles me. I wasn't looking for it because of the anniversary. I didn't plan it. I simply followed the pull, and there it was, waiting. There's another part too. Jonas is buried in a cemetery about a mile from my childhood home. My family had no idea we had roots in that county going back that far. We thought of ourselves as Baltimore people, city people. None of my older relatives knew about these connections. It was just too far back, just outside living memory. But when I was a kid, I used to ride my bike to that cemetery. I was drawn to it for reasons I couldn't explain. There was a Revolutionary War soldier buried there, Captain Jonathan Murray Sr., with a historical marker on his grave. When I was 9 or 10, I used to visit that headstone like it was part of some private adventure. Years later, I found out that Captain Murray had been a neighbor of one of my ancestors, Henry Kelbaugh. Their names appeared close together on the same census page from 1820, so the place I felt drawn to as a child wasn't random after all. Or at least, it doesn't feel random now. Jonas did survive the war. He and Bethany remained married afterward, and it seems they built a life together. But the pain of what happened to him, the consequences of fear and youth and bad decisions, the humiliation of imprisonment, all of that reached across time in a way I still don't fully understand. I'm not saying with certainty that I was him. I don't know that. But I do feel, deep down, that I somehow knew the story before I knew the facts, and I can't shake the feeling that I was led to find it. I still remember how big those little paranormal games felt back in middle school. This was the early 2000s, so everybody had some kind of schoolyard legend they believed in, or at least pretended not to believe in. Kids were folding paper fortune tellers and asking who they were going to marry. People were twisting paper clips into little dowsing rods and using them to ask questions about crushes, friendships, all that awkward middle school stuff. But there was one game everybody knew: Bloody Mary. And for some reason, my friends and I decided we were finally going to try it. There were 3 of us that day, and the strange part is that we all had almost the same first name. I'll call myself Aaron here, and the other 2 were Ari and Aaron. At the time, that felt important somehow. We had heard all these rumors that rituals were stronger when 3 people did them together. You know how kids talk. Someone always has a cousin or an older sibling who knows something. So after class one afternoon, we went into one of the school bathrooms. We checked the stalls first. Every single one. Nobody was in there. Then we closed the door, pulled the little window shutter so the room got darker, and turned off the lights. It wasn't pitch black, but it was close. The only thing I could really make out was the faint shape of the mirror above the sinks. The three of us stood there shoulder to shoulder, staring into it. And before we even said anything, I remember feeling wrong about it. Not scared exactly, at least not at first. More like the air had gotten heavier, like we had stepped into a place that didn't want us making jokes anymore. Then we started saying it together. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. For a few seconds, nothing happened. No face in the mirror, no shadow behind us, no hand on the glass, nothing. And honestly, I think we were just about to laugh it off. That nervous kind of laugh kids do when they're relieved but don't want to admit they were scared. Then something crashed behind us. It came from one of the stalls. It was loud, sharp, metallic. The only way I can describe it is this. It sounded exactly like a big knife hitting the tile floor, then bouncing. Clang. 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 The sound echoed through the bathroom, and all three of us turned around at the same time. Nobody was there. No one had come in. No one had walked out. We had checked the stalls ourselves, and whatever made that sound, it had happened inside the bathroom with us. For maybe 1 second, we all just froze. Then we ran. Not gracefully either. We shoved past each other, slipped on the floor, grabbed at the door, and basically spilled out into the hallway like the bathroom itself had spit us out. None of us went back in to investigate. Not then, not later that day. What still gets me is that we all described the sound the same way afterward. We didn't have to explain it to each other. We all heard the same thing. A heavy metal blade hitting the floor. Years have passed, and I still don't know what it was. Maybe it was fear. Maybe our imaginations filled in the blanks. Maybe the building made some weird noise at the worst possible moment. But I know what I heard. And I know I wasn't the only one. Hey, I want to share with you a story from a few years ago. Something that still gives me chills when I think about it. So, back when I was 18, my friends and I decided to take a trip to a rural village to unwind. My late grandparents had a house there, nothing fancy, but it felt like the perfect escape from city life. We packed up, took a 2-hour drive, and then walked for about half an hour to reach the village. It was bigger than I expected, with chickens, goats, and dogs roaming freely. A real countryside vibe. We settled into the house and spent the first day resting. The next morning, we planned to visit this scenic spot my dad had told me about. We packed water but forgot food, thinking the trip would be short. After about 30 minutes hiking through some dense woods, we arrived at this breathtaking clearing with a huge tree and a stunning view. But, being young and curious, we kept exploring and lost track of time. Ended up spending an extra hour and a half wandering around. When we decided to head back, things got weird. We tried retracing our steps, but no matter how fast we walked or jogged, we couldn't find that big tree again. Panic started setting in. Then, out of nowhere, an old woman appeared on the trail. We asked her how close the village was, and she said we'd been heading the wrong way. The village was still a 3-hour walk away. 3 of us were barely able to stand at that point. So when she offered us shelter and food, we were hesitant but eventually agreed. Her cabin was small but clean, with a little garden and a goat tied outside. Inside, the furniture was old but tidy. She served us plates filled with chicken, veggies, salad, and tea. Everyone except my friend Adam and me ate eagerly. Adam was suspicious, not touching the food or tea, and I was torn between my hunger and caution, but eventually gave in. After eating, the woman excused herself to rest, and one by one, we all fell asleep on those hard sofas. I set an alarm to wake us after 30 minutes. Adam decided to stay awake and watch around. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by worried faces. It was sunrise, but Adam was nowhere to be found. We called for him, but no answer. I went to check the woman's room where she had gone to sleep. But the room was empty. No bed, no furniture, just 4 bare walls. The kitchen was empty too. My phone was dead, and all our phones had lost power somehow. We ran towards the village, calling Adam's name. When we finally reached some neighbors, they looked scared and asked, "Where have you been for the past 3 days?" Turns out, we had been missing for 3 days. My parents were worried sick, had called the neighbors, and even reported me missing. The whole village had been searching. They took us to the local mosque, where the imam suggested it might be witchcraft. We went back with some men to search for Adam near the cabin, but found no trace. Even the police couldn't find anything. To this day, I wonder what really happened. Why was Adam the only one to disappear? Was it because he didn't eat, or because he was exploring the cabin? A part of me wants to go back, to uncover the truth, but every time I think about that place, I'm gripped by a deep fear. I don't know if that woman was some kind of witch, or if something else was going on, but it's a mystery that still haunts me. Hey, I want to share a couple of experiences that have really stuck with me. Stuff that's a little out there, but felt so real. So, a while ago, my partner and I moved into this old mansion that's been converted into apartments. It dates back to the mid-1800s, and yeah, people say it's haunted. I've always been sensitive to energy and the paranormal, but this place surprised me. From the moment we stepped in, I sensed a presence. This young woman in a purple lace dress with brown hair and eyes, and an older lady at the staircase, dressed in black, looking quite stern. I even had dreams about a man with a black beard and green eyes, and a little toddler in overalls. Seems like a family once called this place home. We've heard knocks, seen things move, and once, while playing video games with friends, the TV turned off, then back on, almost like it was responding. We burned Palo Santo and used black salt around the windows to keep things calm. But one night, during a thunderstorm, my baby was restless, so we put him in his crib. When I checked the baby monitor, I saw strange orbs moving near him. It got really cold suddenly, even though we were in a heat wave, and the salt lamp flickered. I felt a sad, cold energy from the corner of his room, so we brought him back to the living room. The orbs stayed on the monitor even after. A friend analyzed the footage and saw faces, an adult man, 2 women, and a child. It was eerie, but also kind of beautiful in a strange way. Then there's this other story from a friend who works nights alone at a slaughterhouse in Wyoming. He started noticing noises, shadows, and even whispers when he was by himself. One coworker told him the place is lively before anyone arrives. My friend joked with the spirits, asking them to give him space since he needed to work, but that only seemed to stir things up more. He'd see figures out of the corner of his eye and once heard footsteps right behind him, though he knew it probably wouldn't stop anything. Even after work, he felt like something was following him. He's scared, but isn't ready to quit because the job has really helped his life. He just wishes the spirits could leave him be. And lastly, there's this basement in my family home that's always given me the creeps, even though I don't really believe in ghosts. It's peaceful overall, but there's one room, the gaming room, that makes my heart race whenever I'm near it. It's like this invisible weight or tension sits in the air. I'm not sure what it is, but it's enough to make me anxious every time I pass by. So, yeah, maybe these things can't be explained fully, but sometimes the feelings and signs are impossible to ignore. Have you ever felt something like this in a place you live or work? It's strange, but it also makes you wonder about the stories that old walls could tell if they could speak. Listen, I know not everybody wants to watch a whole video, and that's fine. But if you don't watch the full thing, at least hear the beginning and the end, because I really wanted to clear something up once and for all. I've seen a few people saying I use AI to edit my videos. Some people have even said my whole channel is AI, which honestly blows my mind. I don't really know how someone can sit through one of my videos and come to that conclusion, but apparently some people are determined to see things that way. And the bigger thing is, people are so quick now to call hard work AI. It's like the second something looks clean, edited, or a little different, somebody jumps in and says, AI. A lot of people aren't even forming their own opinion anymore. They see a trend online, they see other people saying it, and they just follow along because they think it makes them sound clever. I get it. People always say not to feed the trolls, and I try not to. But I'm being honest, it gets frustrating after a while. So I decided to record myself editing one of my upcoming videos, the one I'm planning to post soon, because I thought maybe it would help to actually show the process. And honestly, some of you might find it interesting too, because creators don't always show what happens behind the curtain. AI bothers me because it takes credit away from people who are really putting in the time. There are people filming, editing, adjusting sound, color grading, writing descriptions, coming up with titles, and doing all of that by hand. Then AI can spit something out in under a minute, and suddenly people start accusing real creators of doing the same thing. From what I've seen, you can usually still tell when something is AI. Something moves wrong, something passes through a body, the physics look strange, or there's just that weird, unnatural feeling. I haven't really seen a full 5 or 10-minute video yet that is completely AI and perfectly patched together without obvious mistakes. I'm also hoping the mods over on Paranormal site can keep paying attention to this kind of thing, because that's where I post most of my content, and that's where I see a lot of those comments calling my work AI. I also see this as a teaching moment, not just for me, but for anyone watching. For the people who are quick to call something AI, please slow down. Stop following the crowd for 2 seconds and actually look at the video. Analyze it. Think about it. Don't just drop a comment on someone's work when you don't really know what you're talking about, because that kind of comment can hurt someone's credibility. Other people see it, believe it, and then they don't even bother watching the video for themselves. That's not fair, especially when it happens to a smaller creator who is just trying to build something. I don't know if it comes from jealousy, boredom, or just wanting attention, but trying to damage a random person's reputation like that is a really ugly thing to do. Anyway, for the people who actually watch the whole video and read this, I'd genuinely like to hear your thoughts. And if you're a creator too, I'd like to know how you feel about AI. For me, I don't use AI in any part of my process. I film my own content. I edit my own content. I write my titles. I write my descriptions. I color grade my videos. I put the whole thing together myself. And it's frustrating when, instead of getting any credit for that, I get accused of taking shortcuts. Still, I hope you enjoy the video, whether you're here to support it or just to hate watch it. The trolls have to eat too, so I guess I serve dinner tonight. And just for fun, I'm aiming for -100 downvotes on this post. Think we can make it happen? I'll even start it off myself. Alright, later. Hey, I want to share something personal that's been weighing on me for a while now. There's this one room in our basement. I used to think it was just my imagination or leftover fears from childhood, but lately, it's been a different story. I always felt like someone was in there, watching or waiting. For the longest time, I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. The strange thing is, My partner Lily feels the same way about that room. The first time she stayed over, we went down to grab some drinks, and when we got near that door, she just froze. She said she didn't want to go in and would wait for me outside. At first, I thought maybe she just didn't like basements. But then, a few months back, when I finally told her about my feelings, she immediately said, "You mean the room right across the stairs?" "That's the gaming room." I asked how she knew, and she said she felt something there too. She mentioned seeing shadows flicker at the edge of her vision. What freaked me out was that I'd never told anyone about this room before. It's getting harder to ignore. The shadows seem more real, and I hear soft tapping on the door sometimes, like someone or something is trying to get my attention. I'm trying to tell myself it's just my mind playing tricks, but honestly, it's starting to mess with me. I'm desperate for advice on how to face this fear and maybe even understand what's going on. Because if this keeps up, I don't think I'll ever go down to the basement again. And that thought, it's just not okay with me. Hey, I want to share some stories from my family about our house. The one we believe is haunted. It's been a bit unnerving, but also strangely fascinating. First, there's my stepdaughter, Maya. She lived with us for about a year, in the room where our son sleeps now. One night, she went to shower and ended up having a conversation with a woman she thought was me. The door was closed, but the voice sounded just like mine. She chatted for about 20 minutes, thinking I was sitting on her bed. What's wild is, my husband and I were right there in the living room with our son watching TV the whole time. When Maya came out, she even told me it was rude to just walk off mid-conversation. We assured her I hadn't left the couch once. Then there's my husband's experience. This happened when our son was just a toddler, around 3 or 4. After I had a car accident, my mom came to pick up me and the little guy. My husband came home, knowing I wasn't there, but he saw a woman who looked just like me enter our bedroom. He talked with her for a few minutes while sitting in the living room. When he got up to join her, she vanished. Then, the paperwork he'd left on the table was found torn to pieces. It was unsettling. My oldest sister, Clara, had her own strange moment. Her daughter was visiting us for the summer and stayed in our son's room. One night, Clara woke up feeling really uneasy and saw a little girl sitting quietly in the corner, elbows on knees, hands on her face, just staring at her. Our son had called this mysterious figure Little Sarah. Clara covered herself with the blanket and prayed, feeling like time stretched forever. When she finally peeked, the girl was gone. But then, when Clara went to the bathroom, she looked into our room and saw that same little girl squatting in the corner there. Clara didn't go back to the bathroom that night and stayed under the covers until morning. And just last night, at around 4:45 a.m., our son woke me up asking what I had been whispering to him. I told him I hadn't said anything. My husband, who leaves for work at 4 a.m., and our son both saw me pick up the AirPods our son dropped and put them back in the case. Our son went back to bed but woke up again at 4:25, coming out to ask where his other AirPod was. We had just seen me put both AirPods in the case, but one was mysteriously lying on the floor. None of us had touched it since. These moments make the house feel alive in a way that's hard to explain. It's spooky, yes, but also a part of our family story now. Thanks for listening. I came across something today called the Hat Man phenomenon, and I have to be honest, it unsettled me more than I expected. The reason it got to me is because I saw something very close to that when I was a child, long before I had any idea people talked about things like this. I must have been around 6 or 7 years old. Back then, my parents were involved in mission work, so our family moved around quite a bit. We lived in different places, sometimes in very simple homes, and for a while we stayed in this small wooden cabin-style house that had been arranged for us. It was a modest little place, and one detail I still remember clearly is that the bathroom was not inside the house. It was in a separate little structure just behind it. So at night, whenever my siblings or I needed to use the bathroom, we would wake up one of our parents and ask them to come with us. It was only a short walk, maybe a few steps really, but when you're a kid and it's dark outside, a few steps can feel like crossing a whole forest. One night, sometime around 1 in the morning, I woke my mother because I needed to go. The sky was clear, and there was one of those old yellowish fluorescent porch lights glowing outside. This was in the 90s, so everything had that dim, strange, almost dusty kind of nighttime look. After I finished using the bathroom, my mother said she needed to go too, and she told me to wait outside for her. So I stood there alone, just looking around the yard. That was when I noticed something at the front corner of the house. It looked like someone was peeking around the edge. At first, I thought it was a man wearing a hat. I could only see the head and the hat coming out from behind the corner. The hat looked something like a fedora, and the shape of the face had this sharp jawline. But the whole figure was completely black. Not dark-skinned, not hidden in shadow, but black like a cutout, like a person-shaped absence. There were no eyes, no mouth, no nose, nothing. No face at all. And still, somehow, I knew it was looking directly at me. The strange part was the light. That yellow porch light was bright enough to show the plants and leaves behind it, but none of that light touched the figure. It did not reflect anything. It did not reveal any detail. It was just there, perfectly dark. I was scared, but not in the way I probably should have been. At the time, I thought maybe it was one of the older neighborhood kids trying to scare me. That kind of thing happens sometimes, so my first thought was not ghost or monster. I thought it was a prank, so I called out to it. It did not answer. I called again. Still nothing. It did not move. It did not flinch. It just stayed there, staring at me without eyes. And then, for reasons I still do not fully understand, I decided the best thing to do was run straight at it. So I charged toward the corner of the house. As I got closer, the figure seemed to shrink. I do not know how else to describe it. It was not backing away exactly. It was more like it was folding down into itself, becoming smaller and flatter. By the time I reached it, it looked almost two-dimensional, like a shadow pressed against the ground. Then it slid into the shadow of a chair on the porch and disappeared. Just like that. Gone. I immediately turned and ran back to my mother. A little while later, I looked toward that corner again, and there was absolutely nothing there. No person, no movement, nothing that could explain what I had seen. I told my mother about it, but she brushed it off as imagination. And honestly, I understand why she did. I was just a kid. It was late, and children see strange things sometimes. But I never forgot it. That image stayed with me for years. The black shape, the hat, the feeling that it was watching me. And here is the part that bothers me most. I did not grow up in the West, and as a child in the 90s, I had not been exposed to horror characters like Freddy Krueger or anything like that. I had no reason to imagine a shadowy man in a hat. Then today, completely by chance, I watched a video about the Hat Man phenomenon, and I learned that people from different parts of the world have described seeing almost the same thing. I am not saying what I saw was supernatural. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was something ordinary that my mind turned into something frightening. But when I heard those descriptions today, I got chills. Because whatever that thing was, I saw it long before I knew it had a name. Hey, I want to share a story with you. It's one of those moments that really changed how I think about the paranormal. So, I'm not someone who grew up fully convinced about ghosts and spirits. Sure, I had some weird things happen when I was a kid, like once waking up to this shadowy figure at my bedroom door, or another time seeing what looked like a man in a white robe on the beach from our vacation condo window. I told my parents, but when they came to look, he was gone. I always thought maybe it was just my imagination or my eyes playing tricks. Fast forward to college, I was living in a dorm, and there was this well-known story about a woman who'd been murdered there years before. One night, I was alone in my room when I heard a woman whisper my name right next to the wall. I asked my friends if they heard anything, but they didn't. I assumed I was just tired or maybe had been drinking. But then, a few years ago when I was about 28, something happened that I couldn't explain away so easily. I was working as a waitress at this bar and restaurant, and on my first day, the woman training me mentioned the place was haunted by 3 spirits: an old man, a little boy, and a woman. She said the boy even followed her home once and became friends with her daughter. I was skeptical, of course. One night I was at home, getting ready to go out, and my friend was just hanging out on my bed. I was listening to music on my phone, just relaxing since I'd called off work. The carpet in my room is really thick, and the door is heavy. It doesn't just move on its own. But out of nowhere, I heard it creak like someone was opening or closing it. I whipped around, thinking maybe my parents had come home early, but no one was there, and the door was still. My dog was asleep at my feet, and no windows were open. I asked my friend if she saw the door move, and she said she thought so, but didn't want to admit it. We shrugged it off, but then 10 minutes later, when I turned off the music to go feed my dog, I felt this strange chill as I stepped through the doorway. Suddenly, from the dark bathroom beside me, I heard a muffled female voice say something. I caught only the last word. You. I turned to my friend, hoping she'd say she said something, but she hadn't. She was just as freaked out as I was. Honestly, I grabbed my dog and we got out of the house as fast as we could. When I told the bar owner about it later, she said the usual spirits had been quiet since she got back from a trip. She even mentioned the name Rebecca, the woman spirit training me had talked about, and I haven't seen or heard from her since that night. But I still wonder, what was that voice saying to me? I guess some mysteries just don't have answers. I was 17 when this happened. I'm 26 now, and honestly, I've kept this story to myself for years. Not because I enjoy being mysterious about it, but because whenever I've tried to tell people, they either think I made it up or that I had some kind of sleep paralysis episode. And maybe they're right. I've turned that possibility over in my head more times than I can count. But there's one part of it I still can't explain. Back then, my parents had gone away for a family wedding. I didn't want to miss school, so I stayed home by myself for a couple of nights. The first night was completely ordinary. Nothing strange, nothing worth remembering. The second night was different. At around 11, I did all the usual things you do when you're home alone and trying not to feel home alone. I locked the front door, checked the windows, left a few lights on downstairs, watched videos on my phone for a while, and eventually went up to bed. My bedroom was on the second floor. The bed was against the wall, which meant there was only one open side, and there was only one way in or out of the room. I remember that clearly because later, that detail became the thing I couldn't stop thinking about. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. Not suddenly, not from a sound. I just opened my eyes. The room was dark except for this weak amber light coming through the curtains from the street lamp outside. And then I noticed it. Someone was lying in bed beside me. For one tiny, stupid second, my brain tried to make it normal. I thought maybe my mom had come home early and had come in to check on me. But then I remembered. My parents were hours away. I went completely still. The person beside me was turned away from me. I could see long, dark hair spread across my pillow. The shape looked like a woman. She wasn't moving. She wasn't breathing loudly. She was just there. And fear is strange because people always think they know what they do. They think they'd scream, jump up, grab something, run. I did none of that. I just froze. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it was trying to climb out of my throat. I stared at the back of her head for what felt like forever. I kept waiting for her to shift or sit up or do anything at all. She didn't. Eventually, I managed to convince myself that I was dreaming, or half dreaming, or trapped in that weird space between being awake and asleep. So I closed my eyes. I don't know how much time passed after that. Maybe a minute, maybe 10 seconds. Then, I felt the mattress move. Slowly, carefully, like someone was turning over beside me. I opened my eyes again. Now she was facing me. I couldn't see her face clearly. The room was too dark for that. But I knew she was looking right at me. I have never felt anything like that fear. Not before, not since. I wanted to move. I wanted to yell. I wanted to throw myself out of the bed and get to the door. But my body wouldn't listen. Then she whispered, "He's standing behind you." Her voice sounded like a woman's voice. Soft, almost kind, and somehow, that made it worse, because I was facing the wall, which meant if someone was behind me, they were standing on the open side of the bed, between me and the bedroom door, blocking the only way out. I squeezed my eyes shut. I don't know why. Maybe some small, ancient part of my brain thought that if I didn't look, nothing could happen. So I stayed like that, eyes closed, barely breathing, waiting. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep, or passed out. I still don't know which. When I woke up, sunlight was coming through the curtains. The room was empty. No woman, no sound, no sign that anyone had been there at all. I sat up and looked around, half expecting to find something. Hair on the pillow, a footprint, the door open. Nothing. I actually laughed at myself a little. I told myself it had been a nightmare, a really vivid one, but still just a nightmare. Then I went downstairs. The front door was still locked. The windows were shut. Everything looked exactly the way I'd left it. And then I saw something on the dining table. A photograph. An old printed one, the kind with faded colors and soft edges. I knew I'd seen it before. It had been kept away in one of those family storage boxes for years. In the picture were my grandparents when they were young, maybe in their 20s. And standing beside them was a young woman. Long black hair, a narrow face, dark eyes. I knew her immediately. She was the woman from my bed. I called my mom right away. I tried to sound casual when I asked, "Who's the woman in the old photo with Grandma and Grandpa?" There was this long pause. Then my mom said, "Why are you asking about her?" I told her I'd found the photo on the dining table. Another pause, longer this time. Then she said, "That's strange." I asked her what she meant, and she said, "That photo should be inside the locked trunk in the attic." I went upstairs so fast I nearly tripped. The attic hatch was closed. The trunk was still locked. The key was hanging on the little hook where it had always been. Later, my mother told me the woman's name was Marielle. She was my grandmother's younger sister. She died in 1978. No one in the family really talked about her, mostly because of the way things ended. Apparently, before she died, Marielle kept telling people she could see a man standing behind them. It started quietly at first, a comment here and there. Then it became constant. During meals, during visits, in the middle of conversations. She would suddenly look past someone's shoulder and ask, "Who is that man behind you?" At first, people thought she was joking. Then they thought she was trying to scare them. Then they started thinking something was wrong with her. A few weeks before she died, she told her sister, "The man is getting closer." 3 days later, Marielle was found dead in her bed. They never found a clear cause. My mother gave this little nervous laugh after telling me, like she wanted to make it sound less serious than it was. She said old family stories always grow sharper teeth over time. And I wanted to agree with her. I really did. But then she added one more thing. She said Marielle had a sentence she repeated whenever she became frightened. Something she supposedly said again and again for years. Something she said the night before she died. The same sentence I heard whispered beside me in the dark. "He's standing behind you." I live alone now. Most nights are fine. But sometimes, when I'm up late working and the apartment is quiet, I catch myself checking reflections. Dark windows, the black screen of the TV, mirrors at the end of the hall, anything that might show me what's behind me. I've never seen anyone there. Not once. But every now and then, I get this strange feeling. Not that someone is watching me. That would be easier to explain. It feels more like someone is waiting, patiently, quietly, and somehow disappointed that I still haven't turned around. Hey, I want to share something that's been happening in our home for a few years now. So a while back, my partner and I moved into this new condo. It wasn't anything fancy, just a bit bigger to fit our growing family. Things were a little rocky between us, and even though we separated, we still ended up living together. Yeah, I know, it's not the usual setup, but it worked for us at that time. I was crashing on the fold-out couch, and that's when the strange stuff began. Around 11 or midnight, I'd start hearing noises from the kitchen, like dishes clanking and drawers opening and closing. At first, it was subtle, but it got louder over time. I even managed to record some of it since the couch was right across the hall from the kitchen door. When I played it for my partner, he was skeptical at first, but after sitting with me one night and hearing the sounds himself, he started to believe me. We kind of joked about it, calling it our friendly ghost, making light of it, even after the fridge mysteriously opened one night. Things were okay for a while, and we even got back together. But then, a few months ago, the activity ramped up. Pictures started falling off the walls. Some glass frames even broke. Books would shift on the shelves, and stuff would fall off our desk without explanation. Lately, it's calmed down a bit, which is a relief. But honestly, it's been stressful. We've been trying to ignore it, pretending it's nothing. But our kids think it's all a game, and now they're more aware, pointing out every little noise or movement. It makes it hard for us to stay serious, especially when they laugh and say things like, "Oh, it's just our ghost friend." Just last night during family movie night, as we watched the new Croods movie, Xbox controllers and water bottles started flying off tables. It was unsettling to hear the kids joking about it while all this was happening. I talked to my sister Alina about it. She's from our indigenous community and suggested she come over to smudge the place properly, since I never learned how to use white sage the right way. I didn't want her to disrupt her life, but I think she senses how stressed I am. It's been going on for 4 years now, and honestly, I feel at a loss. We're hoping to move eventually, but living here is expensive. So for now, we're just trying to handle it day by day, hoping for some peace. Hey there, I want to share a couple of stories with you. These are moments from my past that still give me chills, but also make me think about the mysterious side of life. So let's start with the first one. When I was a kid, we had this old family home, and one night, my mom was changing the window blinds. I had to sleep without them for a night, which wasn't too bad, but I always struggled to fall asleep easily. So there I was, about an hour and a half into trying to drift off, the moonlight spilling into my room, when suddenly, I got this eerie feeling, like someone was watching me. You know that gut feeling when you turn around and make eye contact with someone unexpected? Well, when I opened my eyes, I saw this huge black shadow hanging upside down near the top corner of my window, just staring right at me. It was so deep in darkness that I could see the stars beyond it, but no light reflected from it. Panic hit me. I wanted to scream or run, but I was frozen. Only my eyes could move. After a few seconds, it left, but I stayed paralyzed until I ran out of energy and finally fell asleep. I kept that to myself for years, until about 6 weeks ago, when my sister came to me over coffee and told me she had seen a similar shadow in her room, right by her bed. Our stories were almost the same. It's wild, right? Now, the second story is about our ancient house. We moved there when I was younger, and from day one, weird things started happening. We had this mountain dog who loved the cold. Where we lived before, she'd spend winters outside in the snow and summers on the cool basement tiles. But in this house, on the very first night, I noticed something strange. My dog, usually sleeping beside me, suddenly lifted her head and stared down the dark hallway for nearly 10 seconds, then started crying and panicking. I turned on the light. Nothing was there. 10 minutes later, the same thing happened, but this time she growled and ran off to my parents' room, refusing to enter the basement anymore. Even during hot days, she'd only go downstairs if I coaxed her with food, but she'd always look nervous and dart back upstairs. Then there was this one night, playing on my computer, when my mouse suddenly flew off the desk and hit my face at an impossible angle. And during a party in the basement, while we were all trying to sleep, 7 people claimed they saw our friend burst into a room, flip on the light, say something, and slam the door. Except that friend was outside the whole time. None of that adds up. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear footsteps coming down the hall, stopping right outside my door. The only real attack was the mouse flying at me. But all these moments together make you wonder, don't they? So, what do you think? I've always felt like there's something beyond explanation in these experiences. Maybe shadows that watch us, or echoes of the unseen in old houses. Either way, they've stayed with me, reminding me that some mysteries are just part of life. Hey there, I want to share something that's been with me for years now, ever since my little girl was just a tiny baby. You see, I'm generally a pretty skeptical guy. I tend to think our minds play tricks on us, especially when we hear spooky stories and then start seeing things that might not really be there. But, well, I also believe there might be more than meets the eye sometimes. So, it was a quiet Sunday evening. After putting our daughter down to sleep, my partner and I decided to unwind a bit by playing Minecraft together. We always play in peaceful mode. No zombies or creepy mobs, just a calm game to relax. Anyway, as we were playing, our daughter woke up hungry. My partner went to get her some food, and that's when I felt it. This strange, heavy feeling like something else was in the room with us. It was so intense it made me pause the game. Now, my partner isn't a fan of anything spooky, not even the zombie sounds in Minecraft, so she keeps things peaceful. I wanted to brush it off as just my imagination, but when she came back, she asked if I had noticed anything weird. I told her about the creepy feeling, and she said that while she was feeding our daughter, she saw shadows moving near the doorway. That was enough for us to stop playing, bring our daughter into our bedroom, and just call it a night. My partner works as a CNA in nursing homes, and she's had her own share of eerie experiences, so she's careful about what we watch or listen to at home. Honestly, that night stuck with me. Even though I want to be rational, sometimes you just can't explain the feelings you get. So, this happened when my girlfriend and I were camping out in my car, deep in this forest area. I'd heard there was some kind of old war burial ground within maybe a kilometer of where we parked, but honestly, I don't know how true that is. It could have been just a rumor. Still, after what happened that night, it's hard not to think about it. We'd been arguing earlier, the way we sometimes did back then. But this fight was different. It started over something completely stupid, something that should have been over in 5 minutes, but it just kept building and building until it got ugly. Really ugly. At one point, it turned physical, and I ended up bleeding. I didn't hit her back, but the whole thing was awful. Then she said she hoped I died in the car, and I said I wish she died too. I hate even repeating that now. It feels heavy. Like we put something poisonous into the air and the forest heard it. During the fight, she threw this necklace I had given her somewhere outside into the dark grass and dirt. After a while, we both calmed down. We apologized, forgave each other, and started looking for it. We searched everywhere. I mean everywhere. We even tried throwing her little cross necklace in the same direction, hoping we could use the angle to figure out where mine might have landed. Nothing. We searched for hours. Then we thought maybe when it got dark, our phone flashlights would help catch the shine of the metal. So we waited. Night came, we searched again, and still nothing. Eventually we gave up and decided we'd sleep in the car, watch something, and look again in the morning. I remember very clearly putting her cross necklace in my pocket. She remembers it too. We climbed into the back of the car, trying to settle down. We were watching movies, trying to pretend the whole night hadn't been so awful. Then little things started disappearing. Food that had been right there. Bottles of water. Stuff we knew we had just seen inside the car. At first, we brushed it off. We told ourselves we were tired, stressed, maybe just not paying attention. But then this chill came over both of us at the same time, and we started thinking about the cross necklace we had thrown. I reached into my pocket to take it out. It wasn't there. That's when the fear really hit. We jumped into the front seats and decided to leave immediately. But the dirt road, the same road we had driven in on, suddenly felt endless. It was like it had stretched itself out. Even Waze started glitching, freezing and rerouting for no reason. I started praying under my breath, and after that, the app came back. We finally made it to the main highway around 1 in the morning. I was still scared, so I wasn't driving fast. I just wanted to get us back safely. But then animals started appearing along the road. Deer, cats, shapes in the grass. They weren't running across the road like animals usually do. They were just standing there by the side, staring at us. We drove slowly, both of us completely silent. Then we passed this area with tall grass on both sides and nowhere a person should have been walking. I saw something brown near the edge of the road, but I told myself it was probably a piece of wood or a stump or something. Then my girlfriend suddenly screamed, "Drive! Go faster!" So I sped up. My whole body went cold. I kept asking her, "What did you see? What was it?" She just kept saying, "Nothing, just drive." Later, she told me what she saw. She said it looked like an old woman standing there in the grass, wearing a dark leather coat and a purple scarf. She was staring straight at us, and her eyes were glowing. We drove back toward town, where there were streetlights and other signs of life. And somehow, once we were out of the forest, most of the things that had disappeared inside the car started showing up again. But they were in places where we absolutely would have seen them before. Places we never put them. Places that didn't make sense. We were terrified. When morning finally came, we slept for a while. After we woke up, we drove back to the same spot in the forest to search for the necklace I had given her. We looked for about half an hour and still couldn't find it. Then I decided to clean up the trash we had left behind. I didn't want to leave the forest like that, especially after everything that had happened. And as soon as I started picking things up, the necklace appeared on the ground right beside the car. Right there, in a spot we had walked past and searched around 100 times. There's no way we would have missed it before. After that, we both came to the same thought. Maybe because we had wished death on each other in the car, something there took it seriously. Maybe whatever was in that place wanted to scare me into speeding, make an animal jump out, make me panic, crash, and actually die the way we had spoken it. I still don't know what attacked us that night. But I do know this. It felt like our anger opened a door, and something in that forest was listening.